The Dragon Slayer Academy existed within the digital world of his favorite game, a place where players rose through blood and struggled to become humanity's last line of defense against the monstrous swarms that plagued the realm. Within this game, victory meant progress. By slaying creatures and completing quests, players strengthened their avatars until they could challenge even gods themselves. That intoxicating pursuit of growth was what fueled him. He had poured endless hours into grinding, pushing his heroes far beyond ordinary limits. After nurturing 1,000 NPC students all the way to S rank, the system suddenly rewarded his obsession with something extraordinary, a new quest. It wasn't just rare, it was unique. An X rank mission, unseen by any other player. The reward promised to match its prestige, X rank loot that could push his champions past the old ceiling of S rank. The thought alone sent a thrill through him. Then, without warning, everything changed. The moment he accepted the quest, his surroundings melted away. He wasn't playing the game anymore, he was inside it. The world of Dragon Slayer Academy unfolded around him, vast and vivid. Yet unlike most who would panic at such an impossible event, he didn't flinch. It felt strangely normal, like stepping into his favorite world was just another Tuesday. He quickly opened his status window and froze, 0 across the board. No levels, no traits, no skills, no gear. A complete reset. Before frustration could settle, another system prompt appeared. He'd been granted a few special traits exclusive to first-time transmigrators. Their descriptions were vague, but hope flickered in his chest. Maybe these traits would help him grind back up, reclaiming the strength he once wielded. Then came the tutorial. The system announced his first challenge: survive for 10 minutes. If successful, he'd receive the Dragon Slayer Academy new student kit. The objective sounded laughably easy. Low-level mobs? He'd handled thousands before. All he needed to do was keep his distance and wait out the timer. But the world had other plans. A deep, guttural roar shattered the calm. The ground quaked under pounding footsteps, far too heavy for beginner monsters. He looked up, and disbelief hit him like a brick. 2 dragons were clashing in the sky above, each unleashing waves of destructive power. Panic surged. He sprinted through the forest, branches whipping at his face as the ground exploded behind him. A single thought echoed in his mind. This was supposed to be a tutorial. 2 S-rank bosses at the very start made no sense. Then again, this was an X difficulty quest. Maybe this was the price of exclusivity. In the distance, the fire dragon began charging a devastating spell. The air shimmered, and the temperature spiked. If he stayed put, he'd be vaporized within seconds. Desperation took over, and his thoughts jumped back to those mysterious traits. One of them stood out: copy. He activated it. As its name implied, the skill allowed him to duplicate another being's abilities temporarily. It was his only chance to survive the inferno that was about to swallow the world. To successfully copy a skill, proximity was essential. The system required the user to observe the ability closely, and, more importantly, to identify the target's name and rank before duplication could occur. For an average player, that would be a nightmare. But for someone who once dominated the leaderboards, such prerequisites were nothing more than routine. Without wasting a second, he locked onto his target, the fire dragon, and replicated one of its traits: elemental resistance. A faint shimmer enveloped his body, forming an invisible barrier just as the flames surged forward. The searing heat licked at his skin, but the copied resistance kept him from being reduced to ash. Unfortunately, copying a skill would have to wait. His mana flow was empty, his veins dry of any energy that could sustain an ability. Then, a sudden shift in the air sent shivers through him. The wind reversed, violently dragging dust and debris toward the fire dragon's maw. The beast was preparing to unleash a full-force breath attack. Across the sky, its rival, the lightning dragon, began to charge its own, sparks crawling across its massive wings. Panic set in. He bolted, sprinting through the scorched forest as the ground trembled beneath his feet. Even with his newfound resistance, a direct hit from a dragon's breath would turn him into a stain on the dirt. These attacks were legendary, the signature weapons of apex predators. He didn't look back. The air roared as both dragons unleashed their fury, the collision of fire and lightning splitting the sky apart. The resulting explosion swallowed the forest in a blinding storm of energy. By the time the shockwave reached him, the system chimed in. The 10-minute tutorial had ended. Against all odds, he'd survived. The system rewarded his survival with the standard Dragon Slayer Academy starter kit, a uniform, a student ID, and a train ticket for the next phase. Tutorial 2. Board the train bound for Dragon Slayer Academy. Moments later, the scene shifted. The train platform buzzed with chaos. The sheer number of new recruits made it impossible to find a free seat once aboard. Every cabin was packed. In one corner, a young man carrying a katana politely asked a passenger to make space. His request was met with absolute silence. The girl occupying the seat was fast asleep, unbothered by the noise around her. That's when the new arrival, Kim Ho, stepped into the same cabin, scanning for an empty spot. He noticed the situation and, with casual confidence, asked the same girl for a seat. To everyone's surprise, she stirred from her nap and agreed without hesitation. Settling down beside her, Kim Ho thanked her and introduced himself. She responded in kind, her calm voice identifying her as Seo Ye-in. Meanwhile, the katana-wielding student stood frozen, crushed by the sheer unfairness of fate. He had asked first and been ignored, yet Kim Ho succeeded effortlessly. With a heavy sigh, he announced his name, Go Hyun-woo, though no one had asked. Seo Ye-in gave him the same response as before, silence. Still, he awkwardly joined the group, quietly grateful that at least he'd managed to sit. Kim Ho demanded an explanation from Hyun-woo about why he showed up late for the train. The katana-carrying guy answered with a tale of distraction. He'd come across 2 dragons on his way, an awe-striking sight that nearly made him forget what he was even doing. Kim had seen those beasts too, but unlike Hyun-woo, the memory didn't sit well with him. His encounter had been far from majestic, more like something to shove deep down and not dig back up. Soon, the train jerked forward and started rolling. This destination, Dragon Slayer Academy, wasn't new terrain for Kim. Every time he raised a new hero, this was where he ended up. He'd memorized the place like muscle memory. That familiarity killed any excitement about the trip. He figured there'd be nothing surprising, just a rehash of what he already knew. But the moment he stepped into the train car, something felt off. The students around him, the ones sharing his cabin, and even the staff walking the aisles, none of them looked familiar. Not a single one triggered recognition. They weren't the default characters or NPCs he was used to seeing. Despite this world feeling like a carbon copy of the game he remembered, the people inside it had changed. And that could only mean one thing. Events and quests had shifted too. That uncertainty set off alarms in his head. He decided to stay sharp, eyes peeled for anything that didn't line up. Right now, one particular thing was gnawing at him. The way the girl beside him kept staring, eyes empty, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. Her name was Ye-yoon. She had a unique ability. Those eyes of hers weren't just for show. They broke down the world into readable data, stats she could analyze and use. One glance at the katana guy across from her gave her everything. Plain stats, average traits, nothing special. But when she turned those same eyes on Kim, they failed her. His stats were unreadable. A void, like staring into a locked file with no key. That's why she kept looking at him like that. Brows tight, completely stumped. Her manager once told her to act friendly with people who caught her interest. Build rapport, get close. So she took that advice and popped open her suitcase. Inside were some essentials for the trip, and snacks. Trying to play the role of the friendly seatmate, she offered him a cookie. Kim was thrown off by the move. It came out of nowhere. Still, rejecting it outright would have been rude, so he took it. To break the awkward silence, he asked if she baked them herself. She said yes. That explained the mediocre taste. He then shifted his attention to Hyun-woo and pointed out the strange longsword lying next to him. The katana guy lit up with pride. That blade, according to him, was no ordinary weapon. It was a sacred relic passed down in his martial sect. The reason it was still wrapped? He hadn't earned the right to unseal it yet. Until then, it stayed hidden beneath cloth and tradition. Until the day came when he earned the right to wield the katana, he'd stick to using a basic iron sword as a placeholder. That was the plan. But while the conversation unfolded, the cabin door swung open without warning. A blonde-haired guy barged in, bringing with him a loud grin and a burst of overly friendly energy that immediately shifted the whole atmosphere. Apparently, he was just looking for a seat, but Kim didn't buy it. Loud types weren't exactly his favorite, and this one gave off the wrong kind of vibe. It was obvious the guy wasn't here just to sit. He had another motive. The stranger, caught off guard by how fast his excuse fell apart, awkwardly reached into his coat, pulled out a business card, and introduced himself as Shin Byung-chul. This guy ran an errand business, or so he claimed. He offered to find anything, do anything, legal or not, for a price. Useful services for everyday life, he said. Kim wasn't impressed. He could already see straight through the pitch. This wasn't just some guy running a startup. It was a walking black market in a suit. Even now, he was under pursuit for promoting a shady operation inside a place that clearly didn't allow it. As Shin kept talking, he kept checking the windows, eyes darting like someone on the run. He denied it when pressed, but his nervous glances betrayed the truth. Then he tried to bolt, but by then, it was already too late. The disciplinary committee had arrived. A group run by students themselves, this committee enforced order within the academy walls with more authority than any outside institution. No patience, no warnings. They showed up and immediately demanded he hand over every unauthorized item he had. Shin tried to argue back, pointing out how minor his crime was, like they were dragging him off for high treason over selling snacks and odd jobs. But they weren't listening. The head of the committee stepped in, and without hesitation, hit him with a surge of electricity for not cooperating fast enough. Kim took note of her. She was a lightning-type mage, a rarity in this world. Not only that, but her presence was commanding, ruthless even. And it just so happened that Kim still had an empty slot in his copy skill list. Perfect timing. That bland cookie he'd been given, it was about to serve a better purpose. Without hesitation, he dropped it to the floor, ready to turn the situation to his advantage. Meanwhile, the committee leader had no plans of easing up. With Shin still resisting, her patience ran out. She summoned another bolt, this one shaped like a hummingbird, aimed right at the man's body, ready to end the discussion once and for all. Just when it looked like Shin Byung-chul was about to get zapped into oblivion, Kim Ho made his move. He stretched out his hand and intercepted the lightning attack mid-flight, catching it clean before it could hit its mark. The head of the disciplinary committee was left stunned, unsure whether to be impressed or furious. Kim strolled out of the cabin, visibly irritated, not by the spell, but by the chaos that made him drop his precious cookie. The disciplinary leader had no clue what kind of fool she was dealing with. While they were still trying to wrap their heads around the absurd interruption, Kim had already achieved what he came for, copying the lightning-based skill called Hummingbird. Mission accomplished. He gave a dramatic monologue about the tragic loss of the cookie, his most cherished companion, stolen from him by the meddling of power-tripping student enforcers. One of the committee members, clearly not amused, called his story nonsense. The guy, dubbed Korean Jesus by some, looked ready to throw punches. Hyun-woo didn't back down. His hand went to his sword, silently signaling that if things were going to escalate, he wouldn't hesitate to swing. Tension thickened. Both sides locked eyes, measuring who'd move first. Sensing it might spiral out of control, the committee leader stepped in, reined in her hot-headed subordinate, and offered a peace offering, a free dessert coupon, as compensation for the irreplaceable cookie. Kim accepted the bribe like it was a noble trade and left, satisfied, disappearing once again. Truth is, he couldn't care less about saving Shin Byung-chul. He just wanted the lightning skill, and now he had it. Both a skill slot and a trait slot filled. Clean sweep. Soon after, the committee president retrieved the stolen item Byung-chul had with him. Turned out, it wasn't contraband or a weapon, it was a damn wig. Something he'd snatched from a station attendant as part of a paid prank job. The guy was a money hound and clearly accepted any commission, no matter how dumb. Even Kim had to admit this mess was entirely on Shin. As he walked away, the girl from earlier warned Kim to steer clear of Byung-chul and his scams if he didn't want trouble down the road. But Kim wasn't the type to follow warnings. He figured he'd handle things his own way. Meanwhile, Korean Jesus, still steaming, vowed to remember Kim's face. Not far away, Hyun-woo dug into the committee's background. From Byung-chul, he learned that this wasn't just any group. They were the best of the elite. The one who'd launched the hummingbird spell? That was Song Chun-hai, the current president. The name hit him hard. Chun-hai belonged to that Song family, the same one that ruled over Topaz Tower. And she wasn't just some noble with a fancy title. She was dangerous, strong, stylish, the kind you didn't want to cross. And her grandfather? That was Thunderlord Song Gyong-yoon. A name that carried so much weight, even Hyun-woo felt a little sorry for whoever might end up dating Chun-hai. As for the crew trailing behind Chun-hai, they weren't just some nameless extras either. Jo Byok stood out. He was a student under the infamous Fist King. Then there was Han So-min, trained by the Sword Empress herself. And finally, Gaeum Yohan. Despite sounding like a joke, he wasn't one. He was the sole heir to the Golden Lotus Pavilion, a name that carried weight. With introductions out of the way, Byung-chul decided to vanish before anything else exploded. Once he left, Hyun-woo turned to Kim Ho, curiosity written all over him. That whole dramatic move, intercepting an attack just to save a cookie, it made no sense. Why risk it all for something so dumb? Kim Ho laid the cards on the table. The cookie had been just an excuse. What really drew him in was the lightning spell Chun-hai had fired. That revelation threw Hyun-woo off, especially since he'd clearly seen Kim step in and catch the hummingbird spell bare-handed. Kim shot a question back at him, testing what Hyun-woo actually knew about that spell. After thinking for a moment, Hyunwoo admitted he'd never seen it used before. Even during that live demo, the spell itself was practically invisible. No electric trail, no flash. It didn't even look like it was meant to damage. More like it was designed to paralyze the target on the spot. Kim nodded but didn't fully agree. There was more to the hummingbird than that. He broke it down. The name came from the erratic flight pattern of the bird it mimicked. A real hummingbird moved unpredictably, fast, almost impossible to catch. That's what made the spell dangerous. It relied heavily on the caster's finesse. The fact that Kim caught it said more about Chun-Hai than about him. A proper mage would have altered the spell mid-flight, kept it darting. But this one flew in a straight line and landed in his palm. That spoke volumes. Chun-Hai still had a long way to go in mastering her control. Hyunwoo couldn't hide his reaction. He was genuinely impressed. Not only had Kim broken the spell down with insane precision, but he'd also analyzed its flaws in real time. And Kim wasn't done. He'd made another observation during the encounter. Chun-Hai had cast an E-rank spell using only a D-rank strength stat. That wasn't something just anyone could do. It hinted at a powerful trait backing her up, or maybe a huge internal mana reserve. Either way, Kim was convinced she'd eventually meet all the expectations tied to being the Thunderlord's granddaughter. Back on Hyunwoo, the guy was already acting like a die-hard fan. In just a short time, he'd gone from stranger to devoted follower. Kim thought he was laying it on a little too thick, but Hyunwoo wasn't joking around. He even offered to help with anything, anytime. Kim didn't hesitate. If help was offered, he was going to take it. Without wasting the chance, he roped Hyunwoo in for the next part of his plan. Right then, Kim Ho casually slipped in a request. He needed to borrow a silver coin. No build-up, just straight to the point. Cut to their next stop. A beat-up, half-forgotten machine sitting in the corner of what used to be a casino. That's right, a gambling den now reduced to rubble, and this machine looked like it hadn't worked since the building lost its license. To Hyunwoo, it was nothing more than a rusted-out relic. But to Kim Ho, it was an opportunity. In fact, he was willing to gamble everything he had on it, which at the moment was exactly one silver coin that wasn't even his. He shoved the coin in. At first, nothing happened. Dead silence. The thing looked just as broken as it had before, and doubt began to creep in. Then it roared to life. Lights flickered, gears shifted, and a hidden event. The broken slot machine sprang open. A familiar feature to Kim Ho, who'd already unlocked every achievement in the game version of this world. He didn't waste time, grabbed the lever, gave it a confident pull, and hoped the payout would be worth it. But all that fanfare led to a single result. A water bottle. No rare weapon, no legendary gear, not even one of those absurd joke items like the unyielding fork sword or the farmer's shotgun. Just a plain bottle of water. Hyunwoo stared in disbelief, unable to figure out what kind of scheme Kim was running here. Kim, on the other hand, immediately laid out the real issue. Messing with this machine was strictly against Academy rules. Anything obtained from it counted as an illegal gain. That meant they were breaking the law, plain and simple. Realization hit Hyunwoo hard. He was now an accomplice, acting as lookout while Kim spammed the slot lever for contraband loot. Kim figured they were safe. The committee rarely patrolled this area. Famous last words. Just moments later, Han So-min, yes, that Somin, appeared right on cue. She didn't hesitate to remind them what messing with the machine meant. Demerits. Serious ones. The tables had turned. Fast. Kim Ho whispered instructions. Stall her. Hyunwoo didn't flinch. Somin warned him he'd be punished too, but he didn't care. In fact, he welcomed it. Sword drawn, he looked eager to test his strength against a disciple of the Sword Empress herself. Somin didn't hold back. She took note of his name, gave no more warnings, and charged. Her first attack came in heavy and fast. A solid forward thrust. Hyunwoo blocked it cleanly, then swung back with a counterstrike. She dodged with ease. A pause followed, brief but tense. Then Somin gathered energy into her blade, and everything about her movement changed. She launched forward with blinding speed, kicked off the ground, and hurled herself downward, channeling her entire weight into a crushing vertical strike. Somin's attack came down hard, so much so that Hyunwoo had to brace with both hands just to block it. From the sidelines, Kim Ho kept a close eye on the clash, quickly noticing a key issue. Hyunwoo was struggling, not because of skill, but because he lacked internal energy. That deficit was dragging him down, but Kim wasn't ready for the fight to end. He came for entertainment, not a quick finish. With a swift motion, he cast an amplification spell toward Hyunwoo, forcefully boosting the swordsman's magic core from E rank to C. The spell wasn't permanent. 1 minute duration, 1 hour cooldown. Still, that 1 minute was all Hyunwoo had, and he needed to make it count. As the timer ticked down to 14 seconds, Kim Ho's attention briefly drifted. He thought back to slot machines and why most players avoided them. Too random, too risky. But there was a hidden mechanic, something buried in the system that few ever discovered. A guaranteed jackpot on the 6th spin, a failsafe, just like a gacha game's pity counter. Most players started the game with 5 coins. Kim had now used his 5th. The 6th? That one would guarantee the best reward in the machine. All he needed was one more coin, the one he borrowed from Hyunwoo. He dropped it into the slot. The machine clanked and whirred, then spat out its highest tier prize, a rank C dark ice crystal. Dangerous, volatile, and potentially lethal if misused. But the reward was real. Before he could celebrate, trouble crept up behind him. A blue-haired attacker, silent and quick, moved in to strike from Kim Ho's blind spot. But Kim had already accounted for that. Right on cue, Hyunwoo intercepted the attack, knocking it off course. But the cost was high. His iron sword shattered on impact. The buff expired. Somin was expecting him to collapse or retreat, but instead, she watched Kim Ho uncork the crystal and drink it. Warning label be damned. The system responded instantly, applying a frozen status across his entire body. His breathing seized, his throat tightened. He looked like he was choking to death, like a real-time reenactment of Joffrey's infamous demise. But the freezing effect glitched, toggling on and off in a constant loop. He wasn't dying. And then, as if nothing had happened, Kim Ho stood up. Calm, steady, untouched. Both Somin and Hyunwoo stood frozen for real, completely stunned by what they'd just witnessed. Right after the chaos settled, Hyunwoo turned to Kim Ho, asking what exactly he'd just consumed. Kim, without hesitation, claimed it was a mana-replenishing elixir. Simple, clean, totally misleading. But let's rewind to the truth behind that 6th spin. That final roll of the slot machine dropped the dark ice crystal, one of the most dangerous items a beginner could ever stumble upon. Just a shard smaller than a fingernail was enough to turn a person into a frozen statue. Instant death, no delay. Think of it as Medusa's petrification, but willingly ingested. It wasn't just risky, it was straight up suicidal. Except, for Kim Ho, it wasn't. He was the exception, thanks to his S-rank elemental resistance, the same broken trait he earned from slaying an S-rank dragon during his tutorial. That resistance put his body in a loop, constantly applying and nullifying the frozen status. The result? Complete immunity. Not only that, the dangerous energy packed into the crystal was now his to use freely, without any of the drawbacks. As for how he got away with it in front of the disciplinary committee, he pulled out the manipulator playbook, full gaslight mode, smooth explanations, half-truths, enough technical jargon to throw them off. It worked. Hyunwoo, meanwhile, felt content. Helping Kim out gave him a chance to duel Somin, a rare opportunity for any swordsman. And Kim made sure to thank him, because without that borrowed coin, the jackpot wouldn't have happened. Still curious, Hyunwoo asked about that amplification spell Kim had used during the fight, but Kim turned him down. The spell wasn't something he could spam. It had cooldown restrictions, and even Hyunwoo had to admit, anything that powerful needed a limit. While the two discussed magic and close calls, Yane, their sleepy-eyed companion, was barely keeping up with the conversation. She'd been dozing off for most of the trip. Their train started to slow, approaching the final stop, Dungeon Island. This place had a history drenched in blood. Once a lawless zone ruled by criminals and violence, it became legendary thanks to one man, the original Dragon Slayer. He wiped out every criminal on the island, conquered the endless dungeons single-handedly, and laid the foundations of a new city built on top of the chaos. From that city rose the Dragon Slayer Academy, a sanctuary for building elite warriors. The train pulled in. As they stepped off, Hyunwoo was struck by the atmosphere. The academy grounds were overflowing with students. Every background, every walk of life, all gathered in one place. Before they could take it all in, they ran straight into Chun Hai. The committee leader hadn't forgotten. She wanted Kim Ho back in her office, immediately. The scene cut to the committee's interrogation chamber, a grim room known across campus for changing lives, and not in a good way. Anyone who entered that space rarely came out the same. That reputation wasn't exaggerated. The questioning started with a full-body scan. The goal was clear. Confirm the effects of the dark ice crystal Kim Ho had swallowed earlier, but nothing registered. The frozen status was gone, wiped clean, no trace. That alone raised eyebrows. The committee began to question whether the forbidden item had even been real in the first place. Sehun, the cold-blooded head of the interrogation department, made his stance obvious. If Kim Ho stepped out of line again, there wouldn't be a second warning. No one had been harmed this time, but the next visit would come with consequences. With that, the session wrapped up, much to Chunhye's frustration. She clearly wanted more out of it. Everything about the incident reeked of suspicion. The kid had gone out of his way to activate the slot machine, a rule-breaking move on its own. Then he consumed a lethal item right in front of the council and somehow came out untouched. It didn't make sense. To Chun-Hai, one explanation stood out. Kim Ho had to be hiding an illegal skill. She suggested using the magnifying glass, a specialized tool that could identify hidden traits and abilities. Sehun agreed, but added a warning. That method came with risk. If nothing turned up, they'd look like fools. You didn't use the magnifying glass unless you were absolutely sure. Realizing she'd overstepped, Chun-Hai backed off and apologized. Sehun reminded her to stay sharp but patient and told her to hurry if she still wanted to catch the entrance ceremony. It was already starting. Elsewhere, Kim Ho rejoined the new students, blending back into the crowd like nothing had happened. That little detour? It had just completed his third tutorial. Showing up to the ceremony on time earned him a batch of silver coins and a weapon selection ticket. Rank E gear, sure, but it beat being empty-handed. And just like that, his investment, the silver he lost earlier, was now balanced out. The entrance ceremony itself kicked off shortly after. But if anyone expected inspiration, they'd be disappointed. The speaker? A washed-up-looking man who carried himself like he'd rather be anywhere else. The guy looked like someone hired to pretend to care. But don't be fooled. Behind that tired face was a legend. This man had once led the main Dragon Slayer squad, and by Academy rule, the principal was always chosen from the ranks of retired frontline heroes. Back in his prime, he wielded a blade that could cut through mountains and stood at the top of the food chain. Now? He looked like someone still recovering from emotional damage. Rumor had it, he'd been rejected, again, by the same saintess who'd curved him years ago. No wonder the guy looked like he'd been living in the friend zone for a decade. Still, he stood tall and opened the ceremony. He welcomed the incoming students and reminded them of the Academy's core purpose, to raise a new generation of warriors strong enough to slay dragons and carry on the legacy of heroes. The Academy's first hero made sure to hammer in the word slaying. His entire speech centered around driving that point home. Every student was supposed to understand what it meant to become a dragon killer. Kim Ho understood the message, but the delivery was torture. What should have been a short welcome turned into an endless monologue. Half the crowd looked like they were on the edge of passing out. Eventually, the speech reached its end. Only Hyunwoo looked thrilled, glowing like someone who just had a life-changing moment. Everyone else, including Kim Ho, looked dead inside. Apparently, the swordsman had built a natural resistance to long-winded speeches after years of training under a master who loved to rant. The second phase of the ceremony started. The staff announced the new list of restricted items. Anyone caught holding one would face punishment. Then came the big announcement. All new students would face a trial in a dungeon's first floor, the safest zone. It was a way to test them early, without major risk. Instructor Four Eyes stressed the importance of safety and obeying the rules. With that, the ceremony finally ended. No one could believe it was actually over. It felt like surviving a mental dungeon. Right after, Byung-chul appeared again, casually inviting the trio out for food. Looked like he'd earned himself a new tattoo, probably got clawed by the creature he annoyed earlier. He warned them to enjoy the meal while they could. Tomorrow, everything changed. Later that night, Hyunwoo and Kim Ho found out they'd been assigned dorms right next to each other. While Hyunwoo got excited about that, Kim Ho stepped into his room with a different goal. No rest yet. He sat on the bed, crossed his legs, and entered a meditative state. The focus? Building a mana core. To use magic, one needed a core, an internal engine to channel mana. Kim Ho had never made one in real life, but he knew the theory like the back of his hand. He'd played this game enough times to memorize every system. On top of that, his body had already fused some mana with the dark ice crystal, giving him a head start. Next door, Hyunwoo was doing the same, sitting still, reflecting on every move and mistake from his fight with Sumin, the Sword Empress's disciple. Both were locked in silence, mentally preparing for what tomorrow had in store. She had been Hyunwoo's true opponent for a long time. Even though both of them held back during the duel, things would have been far messier if they'd fought at full strength. The only reason Hyunwoo lasted as long as he did was because Kim Ho stepped in and boosted his core mid-fight. That intervention stretched the battle far beyond what should have been possible. Hyunwoo couldn't shake the impression. Kim Ho felt more like a master than a peer. The guy always stayed calm under pressure, dissected every situation like he was 5 steps ahead, and carried an edge that couldn't be taught. That's why Hyunwoo found himself stuck at a crossroads. Could he really trust him? Could he ask for help? But he dropped the thought quickly. Making his first friend into some kind of deal-based partner didn't sit right with him. Instead, he doubled down on improving himself with his own strength. The next day rolled in. A temporary classroom had been assigned, and students gathered inside, talking among themselves. Even Yane, perpetually half asleep, managed to show up on time, surprising everyone who expected her to be late again. But the room was missing one key thing: a teacher. Class had technically started, but no one was running it. The longer the wait dragged on, the more it felt like whoever was in charge had a serious problem with punctuality. Then, finally, someone stepped into the room, and the energy shifted fast. At first, the students looked excited. That vanished the second they saw his face. The man who walked in looked like someone straight out of a police lineup. Wild-eyed, scarred, and carrying the vibe of someone who'd just broken out of a maximum security prison. He introduced himself as their homeroom teacher, Lee Sudok. He didn't waste time. He pointed at a random student and told her to say his name aloud. Panic set in. She stammered something about the villain hunter. Wrong. Tried again. The human butcher. Closer. Both were nicknames that stuck, and both were terrifying for a reason. Kim Ho, watching silently, took a mental step back to assess the situation. This wasn't just some scary dude. Sudok wasn't a teacher by choice. He was a hunter, a specialist who tracked down S-rankers who'd gone rogue. In a world where elite heroes were forged like weapons, some cracked and turned villain. Sudok's job? Find them and break them. And break them he did. He wasn't famous for arrests. He was famous for body counts. Villains didn't get captured. They got buried. That's how he earned his titles. And according to him, he only agreed to teach because the principal wouldn't stop asking. Now he had a classroom instead of a battlefield. But his expectations hadn't changed. Execution still had to be perfect. His message was brutal and clear. Anyone who failed his class could expect the same treatment he gave villains. Perfect motivation. If fear didn't light a fire under them, nothing would. With that, he launched into his first lesson, an introduction to the school's grading system. The grading system kicked off with the written exam, which made up 30% of the total score. Then came behavior, a 10% slice awarded simply for staying out of trouble. Easy points, unless someone messed up. A single mistake could tank that score to 0 and drag everything else down with it. Sudok, dripping with sarcasm, made it clear he'd be keeping a close eye on every student, hoping at least a few might survive until graduation. The next part focused on practical exams, broken into 2 sections, dungeon quests and PvP matches. As the names implied, students would be graded on their ability to clear dungeons and fight each other. Rankings would be relative, based on performance compared to their peers. Add it all up. 30% written, 50% practical, and 10% behavior. A clean 100-point evaluation system. With grading explained, Sudok didn't bother wasting time. He led the group straight to the arena. Multiple fights were already in progress. This was what Byung-chul had been hyped about the day before. The PvP battles. Rules varied depending on the setup, but today's format was labeled as a deathmatch. Not the literal kind. Just a fight that continued until one fighter's health dropped to 0 or they were physically unable to continue. Voluntary surrender was allowed. Every match had a 5-minute cap, and if no winner emerged, it ended in a draw or went to a judge's decision. Byung-chul explained that each participant would face 3 randomly chosen opponents from the same year. Every win netted 300 points, but losses or draws. No penalty, but no rewards either. Just dead time. Kim Ho already knew the deal. No negative scoring, but no one was handing out participation trophies either. Suddenly, a system prompt flashed in front of him. A subquest triggered by the placement exam. The requirement, score an average result. That meant taking down at least one opponent. The reward, an extra copy slot. That was a solid deal. From Kim Ho's perspective, the task was easy. One victory in combat and a decent dungeon score were well within reach. But what really grabbed his attention was something bigger. This was a perfect chance to study other students' skills. It wasn't just about passing the test, it was a scouting mission. He could identify standout talent for future use, whether it meant recruiting them as future allies or copying their skills and traits for his own arsenal. Before he could strategize further, the announcer called his name, and that of his opponent. He stepped forward toward the battlefield, eyes narrowing as he saw her approach. Scarlet hair, confident stance, and blazing aura. His opponent was a flame magic user from the Ruby Tower. The Ruby Tower was infamous for raw power, high-output magic that scorched through enemies with sheer firepower. Kim Ho used to main them back when this world was still just a game, and he loved every second of it. But right now, one of their proud representatives was about to become his 5-minute test subject. Manhwa, the flame mage, wasn't impressed. facing off against someone with no fame, no reputation, and wielding what looked like a retired grandpa's walking stick disguised as an earth staff. It was insulting. An E-rank support tool? That was all he brought? One glance told her everything. He wasn't from the Emerald Tower, which meant he wasn't an earth mage. That raised one question. Why bring a staff like that at all? Maybe it was just to boost support magic? Whatever the plan was, she didn't plan to give him enough time to show it. The match kicked off, and Manhwa wasted no time. Treating him like a standard support caster, she fired up a combustion spell, aiming to take him out in one clean blow. Flames roared. The crowd leaned forward, impressed by her precision and raw control. Ruby Tower flare in full display. Then the smoke cleared. Her opponent stood unharmed. Manhwa blinked, confused. Sure, she didn't expect to wipe him out in one hit, but not even a scratch? That wasn't just surprising, it was absurd. Kim Ho smirked, still untouched. Now she was rattled. Something was wrong. Maybe he used a dispel to nullify her spell. She quickly shifted strategies, preparing a technique that couldn't be blocked by typical anti-magic. A full ring of explosive flames erupted around him. Precision fire meant to trap, punish, and overwhelm. He didn't move, not a step, not a flinch. He just stood there, completely unaffected, soaking the blast like it was warm rain. The sight pushed her to her limit. Irritated, she called up a third spell, Fire Pillar, and launched it straight for his head. A towering inferno erupted on impact, drawing another wave of cheers from the audience. She was showing them what Ruby Tower Elite looked like, but once again, the smoke cleared, and Kim Ho stood unscathed. Nothing had landed. Every single spell, ignored. All her confidence, all the pride she poured into her magic, it wasn't landing a single hit. That's when Kim Ho decided to end it. He activated Hummingbird, the lightning technique copied from Chun Hai. Manhwa hadn't expected lightning, especially not from someone posing as a support. She dodged the first strike, but the bird wasn't done. Kim Ho curved its path mid-air, sending it straight into her back, lightning quick, no warning. She dropped to her knees, locked in place, paralyzed by the spell's effect. With the match already decided, Kim Ho proposed calling it. Letting her drag the fight further would only expose more of her abilities to the crowd, a tactical disaster for future rounds. It was advice cloaked in mockery, but it wasn't wrong. Frustrated but realistic, Manhwa admitted defeat. The audience froze in disbelief. The nameless guy with the old man's staff had just crushed a Ruby Tower prodigy. Expectations shattered, like the ending of Game of Thrones, but in reverse. Kim Ho wasn't thrilled about all the attention he'd drawn from his first match. With everyone's eyes locked on him, he planned to keep a lower profile from here on out. But fate clearly didn't care. He got called up for his next battle immediately, no chance to rest. This time, his opponent was none other than Chun Hai, the stylish menace herself, head of the first-year disciplinary committee. Aura sharp, presence louder than thunder, and clearly out for something personal. Kim Ho took one look at her, and just to throw a wrench in her plans, surrendered before the match even began. Sudok, stunned, questioned his withdrawal, but Kim simply claimed he wasn't in fighting condition. He couldn't care less about racking up more points. He'd already secured the win he needed. He forfeited his third match, too, locking in 2 back-to-back losses and lighting a fire under Chun Hai's nerves. She snapped, calling him weak, gutless, and nothing like her grandfather, who had always preached resolve in battle. Kim remembered the man, Thunder Monarch, a legend. He could see pieces of him in her, no doubt. And sure, in a normal context, her words might have carried weight. But not here, not for him. He turned his back, walked off without flinching, and handed her the win without lifting a finger. She was furious, forced to accept the outcome with gritted teeth. Before leaving, Kim tossed in one last insult, asking her to send over that dessert coupon she still owed him. That remark hit a nerve so hard, it was a miracle she didn't detonate on the spot. Can't say the same for her next opponent. Yang Jihong, stepping into the ring, had no clue what kind of fury he was about to walk into. He expected a proper match. What he got was divine punishment. She incinerated him in under a second. Lightning strikes straight from Zeus himself. His body hit the ground before the audience could even blink. The burns were brutal, her aura terrifying. Byung-chul watched from the sidelines and instantly understood. Kim Ho made the smartest move possible by ducking that fight. The man may be reckless, but he wasn't stupid. Chun Hai, though, wasn't done glaring. She cast a burning stare in Kim Ho's direction, side-eye so intense it could melt armor. Byung-chul noticed. Everyone noticed. Kim Ho? Either he didn't see it or he didn't care. He admired her entrance. Power, dominance, flash, classic Thunderlord blood. But while the audience was dazzled by her destruction, the rest of the student body wasn't so forgiving. They weren't impressed with Kim's tactical retreats. To them, it looked like the guy got lucky in his first fight and backed out of the next two out of fear. Exactly what he wanted. Let them talk. Let the rumors spread. Misleading them into thinking he was some lucky amateur gave him the freedom he needed to move in silence. Sometimes bad press was the best cover. Meanwhile, Chun-Hai was cued for her final match, and this one had real heat. Her opponent? Seo Yeon, the Academy's rumored gun prodigy, daughter of Korea's very own John Wick. The reveal turned heads. A gun duelist versus a mage was a matchup worth watching. And in this case, it wasn't just hype. Gunners had real tactical edge when dealing with spellcasters. The crowd started to doubt her. Could Chun-Hai actually lose? Kim Ho didn't commit to a prediction. Not yet. The fight was still unwritten, and he'd be watching. To make things more entertaining, Kim Ho threw 5 silver coins on the line, betting on the outcome of the upcoming duel. True to form, Byung-chul, the greedy little rat, accepted without hesitation. The match kicked off. On one side stood Chun-Hai, the composed and intimidating granddaughter of the Thunderlord. On the other, the cold, unreadable gun duelist, Seo Yeon. From the start, Yeon went on the offensive, unleashing a storm of amplified bullets. Chun-Hai didn't flinch. She blocked every shot with ease, just as Kim Ho expected. Her mana pool was massive, and he knew it. Then came the retaliation. Chun-Hai summoned a swarm of hummingbird spells. The electric projectiles flew toward Yeon, who stayed locked in her firing stance. She dodged both birds initially, but Chun-Hee redirected them mid-flight, just like Kim Ho had done before. One of them clipped Yeon's face, stunning her and sending her crashing to the floor. It wasn't a clean hit. If it had been, the match would have ended on the spot. Still, it slowed her just enough. With her movements dulled by the shock, the second strike was all but guaranteed. Everything was falling into place exactly how Kim Ho had calculated. Chun-Hai was seconds away from finishing the match. Then, the unexpected. Yeon dropped a smoke grenade. The thick smoke burst up, blinding Chun-Hai's line of sight. Kim Ho raised an eyebrow. No ordinary grenade could have landed on someone like her, but this one did. With visibility cut off, the tide of battle shifted. Through the haze, Yeon repositioned and fired, landing a clean shot on Chun-Hee's back. It looked like a direct hit, but just before it connected, Chun-Hae had raised a barrier. Still, she'd been caught off guard. She knew she was in a dangerous position now. Yeon lined up another shot, and Byung-chul pointed out something else. This girl wasn't just skilled, she was rich. That invisibility cloak she wore wasn't standard gear. Neither was the high-end rifle just pulled out. The rifle fired again. Chun-Hai didn't even try to block it. She barely dodged it by inch. That one shot was enough to shake her strategy. Now, both fighters had roughly equal health. Half the match time had already passed. The cloak made things worse. Chun-Hai couldn't see her opponent at all. Every attack from Yeon came out of nowhere, forcing her to react blindly. Another shot from behind nearly clipped her again. But Chun-Hae adapted. Using her barrier, she tracked the mana signature from Yeon's last bullet. That gave her just enough of a trace to lock onto her position. In the narrow window she had, she unleashed a wave of lightning across the arena floor, surging it toward the source. Yeon leapt to escape the surge. That jump sealed her fate. Mid-air, she had no mobility, nowhere to run. Chun-Hai launched another hummingbird spell. This one struck clean and paralyzed Yeon in mid-flight. But the clock betrayed her. The match timer hit 0 the moment the spell connected. Yeon fell to the ground, her health lower than Chun-Hai's. But the battle had ended. Byung-chul was stunned. Kim Ho not so much. After watching Chun-Hye's performance, he was sure no one could beat her in a straight fight. The judges ruled Chun-Hye the winner by health. Still, Kim Ho gave credit where it was due. Yeon had put up one hell of a fight and pushed it further than anyone expected. As for the wager, Byung-chul handed over the coins, already itching for another chance to win them back. Kim Ho turned him down flat. The guy was clearly hooked, and he wasn't going to feed the addiction. Back in the arena, Hyunwoo entered for his match. His opponent? Jo Byok, disciple of the Fist King. This one had potential. Kim Ho took the bet, this time putting his money on the Fist King's protege. Byung-chul called him out for being brutal, betting against his own friend. But Kim Ho didn't care. He wasn't here for loyalty, just for the truth. Naturally, the gambling addict didn't get the message. But Kim Ho didn't bother explaining further. He'd figure it out soon enough. Shifting to Hyunwoo's perspective, the pressure was on. He knew Kim Ho was watching, and this time, he was determined to show everything he had, even if the odds were stacked against him. Drawing the iron sword, he ignored the better weapon on his back. His opponent, Jo Byok, clearly noticed the decision and questioned it mentally. But Hyunwoo already knew. He wasn't ready to wield that blade yet. Byok didn't care either way. He had no intention of holding back. Both fighters squared up, and the duel began. Byok struck first, slipping past Hyunwoo's initial slash and immediately launching a devastating punch. The speed and power were no joke. Even though Hyunwoo managed to block it, the sheer impact sent his body flying. Reality hit fast. His opponent was the real deal. Basic swordplay wasn't going to cut it. Byok didn't let up. Like a human missile, he propelled himself forward again, ready to end it. Hyunwoo decided to meet him head-on, drawing on his clear-stream sword technique to try and break through. It didn't work. Their clash ended in disaster for him. The iron sword shattered instantly under the pressure of Byok's blows. Defenseless, Hyunwoo admitted defeat without hesitation. Still, he left behind a small cut on Byok's shoulder, proof he could at least land one hit. Byok acknowledged it and looked forward to a rematch, just like Kim Ho predicted. From the moment he saw Hyunwoo back on the train, he knew. The guy had talent, but that pathetic iron sword was holding him back. At this point, it was becoming a pattern. Every fight ended with a broken blade. Byung-chul, meanwhile, was crushed. Another bet lost. Another blow to his already sad silver stash. Kim Ho didn't let up, expecting payment immediately. With his coin pouch running dry, Byung-chul was offered another option: information. Kim Ho made it clear. If he couldn't pay in silver, he'd better cough up something useful. Later, the trio grabbed lunch while waiting for the next round of testing. According to the announcer, a raid placement exam was scheduled after the break. As they sat together, Kim Ho grew increasingly irritated watching Byung-chul slowly chew through his food like it was a meditation ritual. Finally, the guy finished and asked what Kim wanted. Kim Ho went straight to the point. He wanted details on the top players from each faction. Byung-chul didn't mind sharing. He didn't think the intel was all that valuable anyway. Now, let's break down the Academy's 4 major factions. Not counting the official student council, of course. There was the Murom Alliance, a martial arts powerhouse led by none other than Mo Yong-jun, the grandson of the Sword Saint. Then came the Magic Tower Society, represented by the Ruby Tower's own Hong Yun-hwa, the same girl Kim Ho had steamrolled earlier in his match, despite her now being revealed as a high-ranking figure. Honestly, the school felt more like a crossover between 4 completely different Manhwa universes smashed together under one roof. Third on the list was the Guild Federation, led by Druid Park Na-ri, famous not just for her position, but also for her tiger-striped cat that somehow commanded as much attention as she did. According to rumors, another member in her guild was secretly hiding their full strength, making the faction even more unpredictable. And finally, there was the Knight's Order. Leading them was none other than Lee Sang-yoon, the Swordmaster's son. If that didn't sound like a Manhwa protagonist's title, nothing else would. Honestly, it felt like Jin Run Candle had reincarnated into this academy. 4 factions, 4 powerhouses. The lineup was stacked, and even Byung-chul seemed impressed by his own list. Then they realized something was off. Hyunwoo was missing. Byung-chul suddenly remembered something about the club president and bolted away in a panic, leaving Kim Ho behind with the ever-silent Yane. Kim Ho glanced at her. She always seemed distant, like she existed slightly out of phase with the rest of the group. He figured he'd at least try to bridge the gap. He brought up the cookie she'd given him before, then mentioned the dessert coupon he got from Chun-hai as thanks. To return the favor, he summoned a blueberry cake with the coupon's magic, offering to share. She accepted. A rare, small connection formed between them over dessert. Mid-bite, Yane asked for his take on her loss to Chun-hai. Kim Ho didn't hesitate. Normal mana bullets couldn't break through mana barriers. Against someone with Chun-hai's mana pool, standard attacks were pointless. Still, he saw potential. If Yane could amplify her shots, she might flip the outcome in a rematch. But then came the shock. Yane admitted she'd never trained mana before, not once. That threw him completely off. When he asked how she conjured her bullets, her blank look said everything. She had no idea what magic bullet training even was. And that was absurd. For a gunner, learning magic bullet was day one stuff. The fact that she had been holding her own against high-tier opponents without even knowing the basics, that kind of raw, instinctual combat ability made Kim's brain short-circuit. Realizing she was winging it this entire time, he offered a bit of guidance. Once she learned to control her mana and picked up proper technique, everything would click and get a whole lot easier. Before long, the placement exam began. Students gathered in the hall as their teacher stood before a massive portal. The next test, the Mist Forest Dungeon. Their instructor, still the same psycho in a teacher's coat, started laying out the rules. The mode was called High Score. Every monster taken down in 10 minutes counted toward their total. The more monsters they defeated, the higher the score. Simple on paper, brutal in practice. The second rule was called the Fixed Zone, essentially a rank-locked zone where everything, from gear to traits to the core itself, dropped to F rank. It meant no fancy advantages, no overpowered weapons, just raw skill. The homeroom teacher laid it all out bluntly and warned them not to get smart with mana management. After the briefing, he began calling names for the next dungeon batch. Predictably, groans filled the room. Most of the students started whining about the rules' unfairness, which only made the teacher more aware of how unremarkable most of them were. A few like Han Somi and Choi Jong-pi looked decent enough to stand a chance, but the rest? He didn't hold out hope. Kim and Yang were up next. While prepping, Kim casually told her to use a rifle and aim for the head if anyone got too close. Chun-hai, observing nearby, found it odd that someone not even classified as a gunner was handing out combat tips like a veteran tactician. They soon split up, and Kim entered the dungeon alone. It had been a while since he'd set foot in the Mist Forest, so he took it as the perfect test of his current strength. The countdown hit 0. First thing he did was dismantle a goblin who had tried to set up a weak ambush. Rookie move. In this dungeon, monsters could spawn from anywhere, throwing most students off balance, but Kim understood the pattern beneath the chaos. The system had flaws, and those flaws were predictable. Recalling the goblin's position, he guessed it was following the C pattern, one of the recurring spawn formations he'd studied. He followed that logic, drew his short blade, and threw it straight into an ogre's eye, piercing the skull with precision. For a moment, he wondered if he even needed a staff anymore. He smiled as he looted the ogre's weapon, treating it like a free upgrade. From there, he rampaged through the dungeon without hesitation, racking up points fast. When 2 trolls charged him, thinking he was vulnerable, they found out the hard way they were wrong. Kim didn't even flinch. Before exiting, he remembered the dungeon had a replay feature and immediately erased his footage. If the system ever synced monster AI to his own movements, it would create complications he didn't need. Only 3 minutes in, and he already had more than enough points to meet subquest conditions. No point in drawing extra attention. He stepped out early. Outside, he spotted Yane leaving the portal, looking exhausted and muttering about how rough it had been. His early exit caught the homeroom teacher's attention. He remembered this was the same kid who once gave up during a PvP match. Now he was clocking out before the 10-minute mark again. Internally, the teacher scoffed. A quitter could never become a dragon slayer. But then he checked the rankings, and everything changed. Kim had landed squarely in the mid-high tier bracket, an achievement that shattered expectations. No one had ever climbed that high in such a short span of time. It was enough to shake the teacher's perspective. Maybe this kid wasn't so ordinary after all. From that moment, Kim earned a spot on his watch list. The next group entered the dungeon, Hyunwoo among them. Kim checked the board. Even top-tier names like Lee and Mo Young-jun hovered around Han Somi's level. It made him wonder if Hyunwoo could take the lead. Right then, the scoreboard updated. Hyunwoo was on top, with the highest score of the day. No fluke, no lucky run. Kim congratulated him as soon as he exited, but Hyunwoo brushed off the praise, crediting his success to the reset Kim had given him during their PvP match. Still, not everyone nearby was thrilled to see them celebrating. A few snide remarks floated their way. Hyunwoo started to react, but Kim shut it down with a knowing wink. No need to waste energy on noise. When Kim asked if the test was over, Hyunwoo pointed out that Chunhaya's results hadn't appeared yet. Back in the dungeon, she was in trouble. Surrounded by goblins, she struggled to keep up. Every shot she fired lacked the edge to turn the tide. Then she remembered what Kim had told Yane about aiming for the head. With focus, she poured all her mana into a single point and drew back her bow, firing one heavy, concentrated shot. It helped, but not enough. Her score came out lower than expected, and as it flashed in front of the entire hall, embarrassment hit hard. She muttered to herself, clearly frustrated that her performance was now public. Once the test concluded, the homeroom teacher officially called off the exam and informed the students that results would be released the following day. He advised everyone to rest until then. But the moment class was dismissed, he made a beeline straight to the system's operator, Four Eyes, and demanded access to Kim's replay footage from the Conquest exam. The tech guy immediately tried retrieving the file, only to discover that the video hadn't been saved at all. That didn't sit right. Suspicion instantly set in, and after a quick search, they uncovered what was already beginning to feel obvious. Kim had deleted the footage himself. The move raised several red flags. The teacher calculated that if Kim had continued at the pace he started, his score would have easily pushed past 2,000 points. That kind of result was abnormal, even dangerous. The teacher briefly considered the possibility. What if Kim was one of the evil lord's apostles who had slipped into the academy? Rather than escalate immediately, he decided to keep surveillance tight. If they rushed to the principal without solid proof, Kim might vanish underground and become even harder to track. As he walked off, the teacher quietly settled on one thought. If Kim truly was an imposter, it was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the Academy Cafe, Kim, Hyunwoo, and Yan gathered over coffee, trying to decipher the confusing Academy booklet. Kim told Hyunwoo to pull out his student ID and check his current score. The number displayed wasn't just a rank, it represented Academy points, a currency system for everything within the school. He explained that these points could be earned through dungeon completions and could be exchanged for items, services, and even recorded footage, replays from other students' dungeon runs. To demonstrate, Kim purchased a recording of Selman's run for 100 points. Watching the footage of the blue-haired girl shocked Hyunwoo. The ease with which recordings could be accessed left him stunned. Kim noted that since Hyunwoo had a high score, his own replays were probably in high demand, and right on cue, 300 points were deposited into Hyunwoo's account from students purchasing his footage. That realization hit hard. It wasn't good news. It meant other students could now study his movements, tactics, and weaknesses with ease. Kim warned him. While the special rules inside the Mist Forest dungeon had helped mask his flaws, that cover wouldn't last. His core was weak, and it was only a matter of time before others figured it out. Still, the amount of points the gamble brought in made the risk tempting. For now, it was a high-stakes trade-off, and the entire academy was watching. Kim eventually unveiled a crucial piece of information. There existed a special training room where the mana density was exceptionally high. This place allowed for accelerated cultivation and faster growth, a true asset for anyone looking to rise quickly. Hearing this, Hyunwoo practically launched himself out of his seat, stunned that such a facility even existed. But the excitement didn't last long. Kim clarified the catch. The room wasn't freely accessible. Entry came with strict limitations, namely a price tag of 500 points for just 6 hours of use. That price hit hard. Hyunwoo quickly realized that if he visited the room regularly, he'd end up more broke than a beggar on the street. Looking for alternatives, he asked if there was any other way in. Kim, visibly more enthusiastic now, revealed there was a workaround, the season pass, something handed exclusively to top-ranking clubs. But that meant ousting someone like Mo Young-jun from the swordsmanship club, which was laughably unrealistic. Hyunwoo threw in the towel early, but Kim wasn't finished. With that same sly confidence, he offered a trade. He'd get the season pass, for a price. The favor he asked in return? Once Hyunwoo became strong enough, he would have to enter the deep dungeon. Unlike the Mist Forest, this one was deadly. A far more dangerous environment, no safety nets, no leeway. Hyunwoo didn't hesitate. He claimed to have a warrior's spirit and accepted without question. With that, Kim told him to grind hard in the meantime, promising to secure the season pass in 2 weeks. Later that day, Kim paid a visit to the engineering workshop to pursue another one of his signature under-the-table deals. Inside the dimly lit room, a shut-in upperclassman was already buried in work, barely acknowledging the new presence. Kim greeted him with forced politeness, stating his intention to join the Magic Engineering Club. The senior wasn't amused. He wanted to know why Kim bypassed Workshop 1 and came directly to Workshop 4. Kim, playing the fool, replied that the Workshop 1 folks had sent him here, instantly irritating the guy. The senior, clearly fed up, told him to speak quickly and get out. While the engineer turned his back, Kim took the chance to assess him, B rank in magical engineering, and that was all Kim needed. Without hesitation, he copied the skill, no permission asked, no shame felt. Then his eyes scanned the cluttered workshop. Eventually, they locked onto a shiny blue cube resting off to the side. A mischievous grin crept across his face. He picked up the cube and casually asked whether it held any value. The senior, without even looking, said it was junk, too complicated to replicate, too useless to bother with. Kim played it cool and offered a catalyst reagent in exchange, feigning guilt over taking something without giving anything in return. The reagent, though not exactly valuable, was a staple for any engineer. The senior agreed, even asking Kim to keep the deal quiet. As Kim walked away, he glanced back just once to see the senior grinning like he had won something. Little did he know, Kim had just traded a 1,000-point catalyst for what the man considered trash. Then, like clockwork, an optional quest window popped up. The task was annoying and most would have ignored it, but Kim accepted it immediately. Because what nobody knew was that the reward for this so-called junk quest was a legendary S-rank item, the Cube of Life. Having once raised 1,000 S-rank characters in the past, Kim knew better than to waste time slogging through a painfully drawn-out quest line. Instead, he headed straight for the mana training room, fully aware of a hidden exploit to craft the item without following the normal route. With amplification magic, he upgraded the copied B-rank magical engineering skill to S-rank and immediately began cracking into the 10x10 Rubik's Cube, a puzzle that would normally take days to solve, but which he aggressively tackled under the pressure of a strict 60-second window. Instead of relying on sheer brute force, he developed a rhythm, intensive meditation for an hour, strengthening his core, then 1-minute bursts of cube solving, cycling back and forth with ruthless focus. Every loop brought him closer to his goal. He had a hard deadline, Friday, because a very specific event was looming, and the cube of life had to be in his hands before then. The following morning brought a surprise twist in class. Yan arrived early, breaking her usual routine, while Hyunwoo was oddly late. But Kim's attention was instantly stolen by a sneak cookie attack, as Yan launched a barrage of crunchy dinosaur-shaped cookies at him without warning. The unexpected assault completely disarmed him. As he marveled at the nostalgic flavor, Hyunwoo finally showed up, glowing with satisfaction from the previous night's training session. His expression said everything. The special training room had worked wonders. That was all Kim needed to hear. He immediately reaffirmed his intention to secure the season pass, even if it killed him. Meanwhile, Yane stood frozen, staring at Kim in despair, her heart silently cracking from the fact that he mistook her lovingly crafted bear cookies for dinosaurs. Moments later, the homeroom teacher entered and dropped a major update. All battles would now take place in the arena, and the match timer was being extended to 10 minutes. No more quick draws. Every second would have to be used strategically. The new rules also made it mandatory for every first year to participate in at least 3 matches by the end of the week, or suffer a steep penalty to their grade. Kim's reaction was immediate. A sly grin stretched across his face. This was what he had been waiting for. The opportunity to wipe out the competition had finally arrived.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Sometime later, the boy who had been following Kim Ho was pinned against a wall by someone. Upset, he complained about how unfair the situation was. A short-haired boy with an angry and demanding look scolded him harshly. He said that his older brother from the disciplinary committee had been defeated by a thief. He then blamed the 2 brothers for damaging his family's name. Nearby, the girl who had also been following Kim Ho was kneeling on the ground with one hand raised. Still furious, the short-haired boy mocked the fact that even a large group had failed to defeat a well-known coward. After letting the boy go, the short-haired boy walked away, called him pathetic, and sighed in disappointment. Later, the same short-haired boy sat on a wooden chair and admitted that he had felt something was wrong from the start. A blue-haired girl standing beside him suggested that they should meet Kim Ho in person. She was Ha Soo-yeon, the leader of the Nature Club and a member of the Guild Alliance. The short-haired boy, Mak Young-hwa, leader of the Emerald Magic Tower, agreed with a calmer expression that they should meet him. He added that the honor of the Emerald Magic Tower had already fallen badly. He believed that the strange box Kim Ho had was not enough to recover their standing, and that Kim Ho had to pay for ignoring their group. Meanwhile, the green-haired boy who had been following Kim Ho struggled to get back on his feet. He begged for another chance and insisted that he would make up for his failure. Mak Young-hwa rejected him coldly and questioned whether he even had the right to ask for another chance. Even so, the green-haired boy did not back down. He explained that he had only been caught off guard and pleaded for one more opportunity. Mak Young-hwa looked at him sharply and warned that if he failed again, he would be expelled from the club. He then asked whether he still wanted that chance. The green-haired boy replied with confidence that he could win. Mak Young-hwa, sounding both supportive and threatening, said that he would lend him his golem. He warned that this time he had to defeat his opponents completely. Grateful, the green-haired boy bowed and swore that he would win. Later, the scene moved to the training ground in the Goblin Swamp. Kim Ho and his friend Seo Yane ran through a group of goblins. Kim Ho told her that since it was only training, there was no need to hurry. She simply agreed. As Kim Ho looked at his system panel, he thought about how to get the best reward in both the solo and duo dungeons. The panel showed a subquest called Second Week Strategy Battle, where the goal was to clear the dungeon within the week. The rewards changed depending on the remaining time, with separate targets for solo and duo runs. For your next rewrites, I can keep it even closer to the original sentence weight. Seeing that, Kim Ho realized he had to clear both challenges within 1 minute. At that moment, 2 goblins appeared in front of them. As he looked at them, Kim Ho judged that the solo dungeon would not be a problem, but the duo dungeon was another matter. He thought that sharing the patterns with Seo Yain would make things easier, but it would not help her improve. Without noticing what he was thinking, Seo Yain simply attacked the goblins with magic bullets. Still studying the situation, Kim Ho understood that helping her in that way would not let her grow. He decided that she needed to learn through real practice. Then another goblin appeared, carrying a large sword. A system notification appeared and identified it as a strong enemy, the submerged goblin. Kim Ho and Seo Yain both stopped in front of it. With a light smile, Kim Ho asked whether she wanted to avoid the goblin like in their first practice or try to catch it. Seo Yain hesitated for a moment, then asked whether catching it would give points. Kim Ho confirmed that defeating a boss monster would grant an extra 120 points. Hearing that, she chose to try catching it. After hearing her decision, Kim Ho activated his power and launched an attack at the goblin. He encouraged her and made it clear that he would support her. The goblin raised its large sword to block, but the attack still hit and threw it back, shaking its whole body. Then Seo Yain suddenly appeared behind Kim Ho, holding her gun aimed at the goblin. She clenched her teeth in frustration. She fired at the goblin, but the bullet did nothing. Instead, it only made the goblin more irritated. Angered, the goblin turned its focus from Kim Ho to Seo Yain and rushed at her. Reacting at once, Seo Yain tried to activate her ability and use amplification to strengthen her attack. But before she could move, Kim Ho stepped in. With a firm expression, he activated his skills again and cut in before the goblin could reach her, making it clear that she would not be hit. At that moment, a notification appeared and announced that Hummingbird's rank had risen from E to C. A huge electric bird formed from Kim Ho's power and struck the goblin, completely overpowering it. A short time later, another notification appeared in front of both of them. It showed that 11 or more goblins had been defeated, with only 18 seconds left on the clock. The remaining time was 2 minutes and 29 seconds, giving them 149 points, and with the 500-point clear bonus, the total became 649 points. Looking at the notification, Kim Ho said that they had reduced the clear time a lot compared to their first practice and wondered whether they could cut it down even more. Seo Yain quietly agreed. Then, with a blank look, she turned to him and asked for another special lesson on magic bullets. Kim Ho smiled to himself, noticing that she had a hidden competitive side and that having trouble against a boss monster had clearly bruised her pride. He then suggested ending the practice and going to the training center. Seo Yain agreed right away with clear excitement. Later, the scene moved to the shooting range inside the training center. There, Kim Ho started teaching her a new skill. He explained that even though her magic bullets and gun were excellent, she was still treating them like simple tools instead of fully using what they could do. As he held a magic bullet in his hand, he said he would show her a better way to understand the skill. He told her to imagine that her hand itself was a magic gun, since that would make the idea easier to understand. Kim Ho then showed her how to fire a magic bullet at a target dummy. He explained that by gathering mana and releasing it at the right moment, it was possible to recreate the effect of a magic bullet. He encouraged Seo Yain to try the method with only her hand first. Later, she followed his instructions and tried to guide her mana to her fingertips, as if pulling it upward. But the energy suddenly flew backward, which startled her. Kim Ho, excited by her attempt, urged her to try the motion again without using a real magic bullet. He explained that success would simply mean pushing the mana outward. After encouraging her, he told her to keep practicing while he went to get dinner items. But she quickly stopped him, searched her pocket and pulled out a black card, offering it to him as something useful. The moment he saw the card, Kim Ho was clearly surprised and realized that she came from a rich family. Later, in the cafeteria, Kim Ho was ordering a mini donut when two disciplinary committee members nearby were talking about how the limited edition snack had been worth waiting for. Then one of the girls noticed Kim Ho and greeted him with excitement, which made the other girl ask who he was. Kim Ho answered casually, but the pink-haired girl from the committee showed clear annoyance and questioned why he was there. Still, she quickly changed her thinking and realized that this was a good chance to confirm something. She stepped toward him and asked to see his hand, which caught him by surprise. He questioned why she suddenly wanted to look at it. At the same time, her thoughts started racing. She suspected that he was the thief who had used a powerful technique during the storage incident, someone with expert control over a rare skill. She also remembered his link to the Thieves' Club, which only strengthened her suspicion. Driven by curiosity, she said she wanted to check something on his palm, comparing it to palm reading. In her mind, the pink-haired girl was convinced that if Inferno Fist had really been used, there had to be burn marks on his hands. Kim Ho noticed the way she was watching him and quietly realized how flustered she seemed. She looked desperate to inspect his hands herself, as though she was searching for evidence, while he calmly let her examine them. Her expression eased as she checked one hand and then the other, clearly surprised to find that both were completely unharmed. The protagonist grew slightly annoyed inside and wondered how much longer the inspection would last. Embarrassed by how long she had been staring, the girl quickly pulled back and apologized for overstepping. The protagonist, however, made one final request and asked her to reveal the result of her palm reading, especially when it came to his luck in love. That only made her slightly more irritated, and she thought that many hardships were waiting for him ahead. The protagonist quietly smiled to himself, realizing that she and the others were still trying to figure out who had caused the temporary storage incident. He felt relieved, thinking that by avoiding her suspicion just enough, he had managed to stay safe for the moment. The next day, the protagonist and his friend Seo Yaen were at the training ground, running toward the forest as usual. They moved together in step, following the same routine they had practiced the day before. Seo Yaen immediately began firing magic bullets at the goblins, though the attacks did little damage. At the same time, the protagonist released his own attacks with his scales and wiped out the goblins in an instant. After a short time, a notification appeared in front of them, showing their progress, the time left, the number of goblins defeated, and the score gained from taking down a strong enemy. The total score reflected both their speed and teamwork, giving clear proof of the results of their training. The protagonist looked at Seo Yaen and felt satisfied. The battle had gone perfectly, showing exactly how well they worked together. In his mind, he calmly admitted that the result had come directly from the effort they had put in the day before. When he saw her soft smile in return, he took it as a quiet sign that she also recognized their success, and a calm sense of satisfaction settled over him. Later, the scene shifted to the arena, where countless students had gathered and filled the stadium near the gates. The protagonist and his friend Seo Yaen got ready while thinking about the solo dungeon ahead. He reminded himself that even though the solo dungeon probably would not be too hard, it would still be smart for her to try a few runs in practice mode just to be safe. After clearing the duo dungeon, he felt confident in his own skill, ready to handle the challenge alone and finally turn his attention to his personal quests. As soon as he stepped through the portal, a notification appeared and announced their entry into the Goblin Swamp. Without any delay, he activated his power and threw a punch into the air, instantly defeating the monsters in front of him. Even inside an artificial dungeon, he realized that controlling his strength was harder than expected. Another notification then appeared and showed their progress. It listed the number of goblins defeated, the strong enemies taken down, the remaining time, and the total score including bonuses. Satisfaction spread through him as he saw the strong results, and he quietly decided to delete the replay before leaving. At the end, one last notification confirmed the completion of the second week strategy subquest, displaying both the solo and duo dungeon times along with improved rewards. As he checked the details, he saw that the reward had already been fixed at the highest grade, so there was nothing left to consider. The system then told the protagonist to choose his reward, presenting options that strengthened recovery and buff-type skills, debuff and illusion-type skills, and wind-type skills. From the beginning, he had been aiming for the trait that matched his chosen path perfectly. Soon, a green bowl of wind formed in front of him, showing the flexible support role he had now taken on. A notification appeared and confirmed that he had obtained the trait skill, officially establishing him as a wind-type supporter. After stepping out of the portal, the protagonist was approached by the familiar short-haired boy, Manhwa, the deputy head of the Emerald Magic Tower, along with the blue-haired girl, Hasuyun of the Great Nature Club. They suggested going somewhere more private to talk. Later, in the cafeteria, Hasuyun started by apologizing for what had happened before, though the protagonist admitted that he had also acted too quickly. The talk soon changed direction when she showed interest in the special item he had. Realizing what they actually wanted, the protagonist brought out the cube. At once, the green-haired girl's small dark cat reacted and rushed toward the cube before curling up inside it. The sight confirmed that the item was real, leaving the short-haired boy briefly speechless. The green-haired girl noticed the kitten inside the cube and tried to call it back out, but the protagonist calmly told her to leave it alone. The blue-haired girl watched the scene with interest and pointed out how drawn the kitten seemed to the cube. She sensed that the cube was giving off the energy of a powerful life-type artifact and asked for permission to check its item description, promising that the club would protect that information with its honor. Seeing no real problem with that, the protagonist agreed. The short-haired boy showed clear shock as he read the cube's description and realized that its effect was 1.3 times stronger than normal stored life-type items. The blue-haired girl was also visibly stunned. Amazed by how absurdly powerful the item was, she then asked whether he was willing to sell it. The protagonist, however, stayed vague and only admitted that the cube had great value. The short-haired boy became more forceful and stressed that the true worth of such an item could only come out in the hands of someone capable, urging him not to waste it. The protagonist found their eagerness amusing and quietly appreciated how direct they were being. Even so, he kept himself composed and said that he could not decide so easily. Still curious, the blue-haired girl urged him to name his terms and promised they would try to meet his demands. The protagonist then stated his conditions with confidence. He asked for season passes to the special engineering room, including 1 princess single season pass, items equal to 3 more passes and a blank skill book. The short-haired boy reacted at once with visible anger, slamming his hand on the table because he believed the demands were far too greedy. As the negotiation continued, the blue-haired girl weighed the conditions in her mind. She felt that asking for the season pass was reasonable, but the blank skill book seemed excessive. Sensing their hesitation, the protagonist stepped back and suggested dropping the deal. Just as he was about to leave, the green-haired girl spoke from the back and revealed that she actually had one of those blank skill books. She admitted that she had not used it yet, since she had no proper skill to imprint on it and would probably leave it in her inventory forever. Looking at her beloved kitten, she smiled and noted how much it liked the cube. The blue-haired girl gave her approval, and the green-haired girl gratefully offered the blank skill book. Without delay, they handed over the item and quickly completed the trade. The protagonist appreciated how smoothly the exchange went, took the item and reflected on the success of the deal. The calm ended when a green-haired boy suddenly stood up, showing his anger and demanding a duel. The protagonist kept his composure and refused, dismissing the idea as unnecessary. The boy was shocked and insisted that duels were honorable, but the protagonist pointed out the irony of someone speaking of honor after ganging up on him with another person. Frustrated, the boy struggled to answer, but the protagonist simply walked away, saying that he had no intention of wasting time on pointless challenges and that the boy could brag as much as he wanted. Seeing a chance to push things further, the short-haired boy pulled out a card and announced a prize for the match, showing that the matter was not over. The card turned out to be a production VIP ticket, which immediately raised the stakes. The short-haired boy asked whether the duel was really not worth the protagonist's time, and the protagonist smiled and accepted the challenge. The green-haired boy left the choice of date to him, and the protagonist decided that 2 days later would be good, explaining that he needed that time to master something first. The short-haired boy, confident in his judgment, remarked that it was little time to design and learn a skill, telling the protagonist to do his best. Filled with excitement, the protagonist assured them that they could look forward to the result. 2 days later, the arena was full of spectators. The protagonist's friend sat among the audience, while the leader of the thief club appeared, concerned about the duel. She questioned why the protagonist had accepted, noting that Manhwa was likely full of tricks. Her brother replied that the protagonist must have believed he could win and had a strategy of his own. Even so, a sense of unease remained, leading the thief club leader to watch carefully for any unexpected tactics. Meanwhile, in the arena, the green-haired boy got ready for the duel, putting on his gloves and acknowledging the protagonist's courage for not backing down. The stage was ready, and the tension rose as the duel was about to begin. The protagonist recognized the stakes with a simple thought, noting that a VIP ticket was on the line and that there was no reason to refuse. From the audience, the short-haired boy reminded both sides that the duel would be recorded as a replay and could be viewed by anyone, and both the protagonist and the green-haired boy agreed. The signal to begin was given, telling both duelists to enter the arena. At once, a system notification appeared. The map was set to the Dark Zone. The rule was deathmatch with a 10-minute limit, and the score was shown at 100% for both Kim Ho and Kwak Ji Cheol. In the next instant, they were moved to another location and the battle officially started. The green-haired boy, full of excitement and resolve, reminded himself of the gap in their levels, confident that he would prove himself this time. The protagonist, however, gave no verbal response, focusing only on activating his power. A faint light appeared at his fingertips, catching the green-haired boy by surprise. The sudden attack shocked him, and before he could respond, the protagonist's strike landed and threw him to the ground. As the green-haired boy struggled to get up, the protagonist commented on the dirt floor, noting that it should not be that hard to endure, even though the boy was acting otherwise. Frustrated, the boy gathered rocks with his skill and prepared a new attack called Earth Cluster, then hurled them at the protagonist. With careful precision, the protagonist avoided the rocks and sent one back at the boy, drawing a shocked reaction as he realized the same trick was being used on him again. An explosion followed, and when the dust settled, the green-haired boy was lying on the ground, frustrated and determined not to lose the match. As he forced himself back up, he acknowledged the protagonist's strength and prepared a more serious attack, thinking that the duel had to end with his victory. Then, in a sudden move, he summoned a huge being behind him, a wood golem, a creation filled with the forest's power that gave life to an ancient tree. The golem rose behind him, showing that the next stage of the duel would be far more dangerous and intense. From the audience, the Thief Club leader watched the duel with growing frustration. Her anger burst out at the sight of the golem, and she shouted in outrage. Her brother tried to calm her down, but that only seemed to make her more irritated. She then turned her glare toward a third-year student watching from afar, furious that he was there and blaming him for letting this happen. Nearby, the short-haired boy kept watching the arena without turning toward the commotion and quietly noted that although he had hoped the golem would not be used, destroying it would not be a real problem. At the same time, the Thief Club leader's thoughts were racing. With so many people watching, the protagonist could not risk using his most dangerous attack, and she felt that maybe someone should step in. The protagonist, however, stayed calm, his face blank as he looked at the giant golem before him. His opponent, driven by excitement, expected to pressure him with threats, but the protagonist's thoughts were elsewhere, going back to 2 days earlier in the mana training room. He recalled his silent training sessions and thought about what kind of supporter was the most effective. He understood that the answer changed depending on the situation, which was why supporters existed in many forms, including healers, buffers, and debuffers. But for an all-rounder, he knew there was no better skill than the one he had chosen from the blank spellbook. Back in the present, the green-haired boy, determined to end the duel clearly, sent the golem at the protagonist. Calmly, the protagonist avoided the massive attack and used his skill to climb onto the golem. As he prepared to counter, he reflected on his choice. For someone trying to become a wind-type support, copying this skill from a blank spellbook had been the most efficient and strategic decision. With one precise strike, the protagonist hit the golem and destroyed it at once. At the same time, a notification appeared before him showing the skill he had just used. Wind Force, a skill that infused physical force into wind, strengthened by the blessing of the west wind and further enhanced by Amplify. The scoreboard updated as well, clearly confirming his victory over Kwak Ji Cheol. From the audience, his friend burst into cheers, excited by the display of skill and speed. Watching the strong duel and seeing the golem fall brought great satisfaction and made the win feel even more impressive. Meanwhile, the short-haired boy, frustrated by the result, could not say anything. Soon after, the short-haired boy entered the arena and handed the protagonist the promised VIP production ticket. Accepting it calmly, the protagonist suggested keeping the replay of the duel private, reasoning that the Emerald Magic Tower would probably not want it made public. Members of the club, including the green-haired boy and the short-haired boy, reacted with irritation to the suggestion and asked what he wanted in return. The protagonist calmly replied that he only expected a small favor later. Without even looking at him, the short-haired boy agreed, and the matter was settled. As the two left the arena, the protagonist reflected to himself. Although he had presented the arrangement as generous, his real goal was simply to keep control of the replay and keep it private for his own reasons. The protagonist activated his skill again and watched the faint energy swirl around his hand with a satisfied smile. He thought about the effect of his new ability, Wind Force, and decided that the slower news of it spread, the more useful it would be for his strategy. A short time later, his friend approached and expressed admiration for his recent win. The protagonist responded by showing him the promised VIP pass, which completely caught his friend off guard. A short playful exchange followed, with the protagonist reminding his friend that he had said he would get it within 2 weeks. Before the moment could settle, the leader of the Thief Club approached, barely able to contain her excitement, and pressed him about the deal he had made with Ma Cheonghua while praising his skill in negotiation. The protagonist answered with an awkward laugh and brushed off the comment until she calmed down. As the conversation became more serious, the protagonist reminded her of the favor he had asked for earlier. The club leader acknowledged it, referring to the Magic Engineering Club, and said that they wanted to meet him soon. Internally, the protagonist realized that the timing was perfect, felt a surge of anticipation and prepared to meet them right away. The scene then shifted to Magic Engineering Workshop No. 1. As soon as he entered, the protagonist could not help admiring the scale of the workshop. The atmosphere was completely different from the fourth workshop where he had obtained the cube. This place gave off a far more polished and impressive feeling. A boy approached him and immediately confirmed his identity. The protagonist recognized him as Bong Jae-suk, a third-year student and the head of the Magic Engineering Club. The boy said that he had already heard the details from Dang Cheong and motioned for the protagonist to follow him to the club room, moving with clear urgency. The protagonist noticed the haste but followed without complaint. Inside the office, the two sat facing each other across the desk. Bong Jae-suk brought up the cube, acknowledged that it technically belonged to the club, but made it clear that he had no interest in pointless conflict. He held out his hand and asked to see the completed cube, stressing that no one else could have made it. The protagonist calmly revealed that he no longer had the cube, leaving Bong Jae-suk briefly stunned. He explained that he had left it in nature's care for safekeeping. That answer frustrated the senior, and he stood up, declaring that the meeting had been a waste of time. Before leaving, the protagonist pulled out some papers, catching Bong Jae-suk off guard. It became clear that he had not come empty-handed, leaving the senior briefly speechless and interested. The boy was instantly shocked when he saw the papers. His eyes widened as he realized that the documents contained the blueprint for the 10 by 10 by 10 cube, and he stared at the sheets while sweating. He pointed out the careful details shown in every design, though he quickly realized that the blueprint was incomplete. Excitement took over, and he demanded to know whether the protagonist had the rest of it. Calmly, the protagonist assured him that the rest had been kept safe. The boy, eager and slightly out of breath, pressed him to state his terms. The protagonist gave only one condition: access to the equipment in workshop number 1. The senior thought about it briefly, then agreed to allow him to use it during the day, with exclusive access from midnight until early morning. The protagonist handed over more papers in return, and the deal was made. After receiving the remaining sheets, the boy's tone changed, and he asked whether the protagonist had considered joining the Magic Engineering Club. The protagonist let out a soft laugh and politely declined, and the senior accepted that with understanding. He encouraged the protagonist to keep producing blueprints of that level and offered him access to leftover workshop materials if he needed them. With a final nod, he left, leaving the protagonist alone. The protagonist watched him leave with a faint smile, quietly appreciating how direct the exchange had been. In his mind, he thought that the foundation was now in place, marking the real start of his preparations to craft a terminal-grade weapon. At the infirmary, the disciplinary committee was busy with its work. A member wearing glasses leaned toward the short-haired boy and urged him to rethink his decision. The short-haired boy, however, stayed firm and asked why he should. The glasses-wearing member continued, pointing out how few first-years could even stand against a golem, much less a third-year student. The short-haired boy replied that, difficult or not, the incident had damaged Emerald's reputation. The other boy admitted that his own sibling had gone too far, but questioned whether the protagonist had truly acted alone. Frustration showed on the short-haired boy's face. He demanded to know whether the disciplinary committee was interfering in Emerald's matters, and the glasses-wearing member calmly replied that he was only asking for a fair judgment. After a tense silence, the short-haired boy finally asked what exactly they wanted. The other boy answered simply, give the protagonist a chance. He proposed a 2-month trial, during which the protagonist's ranking, specifically Kwak Ji Cheol's, would decide the result. The glasses-wearing boy agreed, saying that 2 months was more than enough. As the short-haired boy walked away, he muttered something sharply and then glanced back, calling out the name Song Chun-hai. Hidden behind a wall, the pink-haired girl from the disciplinary committee had overheard everything. Awkwardly, she stepped out and asked if he had known she was there. The glasses-wearing boy smirked and revealed that he had already noticed her sneaking into the arena stands. He asked about the result of the fight and whether she thought she could defeat the protagonist herself. She admitted that she could not say for sure. He then asked whether she had checked the protagonist's hands. Flustered, she confirmed that she had carefully examined both hands and had found no scratches. The glasses-wearing boy paused and thought to himself that if the protagonist had really used Inferno Fist, there was no way he could have recovered that quickly. Had he judged him wrong? The doubt remained, but he knew there was still more to find out. Then he suddenly remembered the protagonist he had faced, and frustration rose inside him. In his mind, he repeated that arrogant look as if everything was beneath him. It was hard for him to believe that it was not the same person. Turning back to the girl, the glasses-wearing boy apologized and said that he would need her to keep working on this. She tightened her fist and answered that there was no need for an apology. She was doing it because she wanted to, and she would definitely catch him making a mistake. It was Monday of the 3rd week. The protagonist's homeroom teacher addressed the class and explained that cooperation would be just as important as it had been the week before. This time, however, the goal was different, and through the match they might find weaknesses in their teamwork that had not been noticed earlier. To deal with that, the academy had prepared a mentoring program, and the students were told to think carefully about it during the week. With that, the teacher ended the announcement without adding more. Go Hyun-woo then turned to the protagonist and asked whether he had already signed up for the mentoring program. The protagonist looked at his system notification, which showed that the application had already been completed under his name. He replied that there was no reason to hesitate. With a serious look, he explained to Go Hyun-woo that participants would be matched with a top-ranked third-year student or a graduate, depending on their tendencies. He added that chances to learn from people like that would be rare. Excited, Go Hyun-woo agreed right away and said that he would sign up too. Looking at his own system notification, he thanked the protagonist in advance. The protagonist then turned to Seo Yayan and asked about her choice. Still half asleep, she replied that it was bothersome and that she was too sleepy. The The protagonist simply looked at her and thought that although she already knew how to form aura grenades to some degree, she still had a lot to learn, so mentoring would be important for her. He wondered if there was some way to convince her. Then Go Hyun-woo's eyes lit up with excitement as he asked the protagonist if he wanted to team up with him for this week's match. The protagonist gave a light laugh and agreed without hesitation, saying that pairing up this time was fine. At that moment, Seo Yaen woke up, rubbed her face with one hand, and asked whether she could not team up with him too. Go Hyun-woo laughed awkwardly and suggested that since there were 2 matches that week, each of them could partner with him once. The protagonist wondered to himself whether his opinion even mattered. Seo Yaen, still drowsy but accepting, said that the arrangement sounded fine. Still excited, Go Hyun-woo then told the protagonist that he needed to train and that the 2 of them should go ahead first. The protagonist answered with a nod and a simple remark to see him tomorrow. The next day, Go Hyun-woo approached the protagonist and apologized for keeping him waiting. The protagonist simply answered that he had only arrived a minute earlier. Inwardly, the protagonist noticed how different Go Hyun-woo seemed. His aura felt sharper than it had the day before, and he wondered what had happened to him. Go Hyun-woo noticed the protagonist's look, smiled lightly, and said that he was looking forward to the match. The protagonist observed him closely and thought that Go Hyun-woo's core had reached C rank far faster than expected. Keeping the mood light, Go Hyun-woo then jokingly asked whether the protagonist's match with Seo Yaen had gone well the day before. The protagonist rubbed his head awkwardly and admitted that they had won, but said nothing more. The scene then moved to the arena, where the protagonist stood facing 2 opponents, a red-haired girl and a boy holding a shield. The protagonist looked at the red-haired girl and thought back to their previous match. He remembered that the opponent they had faced the day before was Hong Hyun-woo, a rising talent from the Ruby Magic Tower. He had already expected that Seo Yaen would not be able to match someone at that level yet, but the result had been even more one-sided than he had feared. At the same time, a notification appeared before him, showing Seo Yaen's performance rate falling from 81% to 78%, then to 74%. Seeing that, he thought to himself that his worst expectation had come true in the end. Meanwhile, Seo Yaen was aiming her gun at them from a distance and carefully adjusting her position. Watching her, the protagonist realized that she had no defensive ability at all. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, gripping his staff tightly. As he closed the distance, he activated his skill, and blue energy gathered in his hand. He struck the boy with the staff and sent him flying backward. Seeing that, the red-haired girl became clearly tense and frightened. The protagonist stood firmly in front of her, with his staff pointed straight at her and ready to face her. Later, while checking his system panel, the protagonist thought about how he had somehow managed to handle everything, even encouraging Seo Yaen to join the mentoring program. But despite that, she had shown no interest. He mentioned that to Go Hyun-woo, causing Go Hyun-woo to laugh awkwardly. He admitted that a lot had happened and said that the kid probably needed to be beaten at least once. However, the protagonist was caught off guard when Go Hyun-woo's words came out harsher than expected. Just then, the protagonist's system flashed with a new notification. A match had been found, and when Go Hyun-woo saw it, his eyes lit up with excitement as he declared that he would show the results of his training. Without warning, both of them were transported to a new place. Looking around in shock, Go Hyun-woo asked what was happening and who their opponents were this time. The protagonist fixed his gaze on the group standing across from them. It was Seo Yaen and her team. At that exact moment, another notification appeared and showed the team lineup, Jang Sam with 572 points and Seo Yaen with 741 points. Stunned, Go Hyun-woo muttered in disbelief that they were facing Seo Yaen again. Seeing that, the protagonist smiled and thought to himself that this was the perfect chance to make Seo Yaen realize her weakness in defense. Go Hyun-woo looked at him with concern and asked whether they would win. The protagonist smiled with confidence and assured him that they would. Without wasting time, Seo Yaen launched an attack at the protagonist, determined to take him down herself. Following behind, Go Hyun-woo answered with determination that he would support him. As the two moved toward their opponents, Seo Yaen immediately used a smoke bomb to cover the area. Seeing it, the protagonist thought that it was exactly what he had expected her to do. He dismissed the attack as pointless and kept moving forward without slowing. Seo Yaen said nothing, but sweat formed under the pressure as she fired bullets at the protagonist. He calmly avoided every shot without difficulty. When he finally reached her, she quickly got ready to fire again. But before she could shoot, the protagonist knocked her gun aside, prepared a punch infused with his skill and sent it toward her. Yet before the punch could connect, he stopped midway and flicked her forehead with his finger. Looking at her, he asked whether they should keep fighting. Unable to meet his eyes, Seo Yaen quietly admitted defeat. The protagonist could see that her pride had clearly been hurt. He then turned his attention to Go Hyun-woo and remembered what Shin Byung-chul had said earlier, that there was one more hidden talent among their opponents. As he watched the fight, he focused on the strange movement of one opponent's right hand. He had found it odd from the start but only now understood why. Suddenly the protagonist called out and told both sides to stop. They paused in confusion and turned toward him. Calmly, the protagonist accused them of hiding their real abilities and challenged them to fight seriously. He said that he was already fighting for real and added that if they were worried about the replay becoming public, they could keep it private. To push them further, he offered information about Yuri Young Myong, Ghostly Shadow, as a reward if they won. The name startled Yuri Young Myong, who turned toward the protagonist in shock. The protagonist thought to himself that he had clearly touched a nerve. Still shaken, Yuri Young Myong said that anyone who cared that much about secrecy would not want to miss that hidden detail. Smiling with confidence, the protagonist answered that he had only promised to share the information if they won and asked how he was supposed to know that. Yuri Young Myong gripped his sword and prepared for another round. He told Go Hyun-woo that if he wanted to go that far, then he would fight the way he wanted. At the same time, Go Hyun-woo noticed how sharply Yuri Young Myong's eyes had changed and resolved to give everything he had. Without hesitation, the two clashed again, more fiercely than before. Notifications began appearing one after another as Go Hyun-woo attacked aggressively. Go Hyun-woo 87%. Go Hyun-woo 73%. Go Hyun-woo 68% even as his exhaustion kept growing. Watching the battle, the protagonist thought to himself that he would finish it with one decisive blow. As the final attack approached Go Hyun-woo, he stayed calm and steadied himself before the clash grew even more intense. In an instant, Go Hyun-woo cleanly avoided his opponent's attack and immediately countered with a skill called Rapid Current. The sudden strike left his opponent stunned before either side could recover. The force of their swords colliding caused both blades to shatter. The protagonist then stepped forward and said that it was enough, bringing the match to an end. He activated his skill, letting a small energy gather at his fingertips, and told both of them to rest. At that moment, the results board displayed the outcome of the match, showing that the protagonist and Go Hyun-woo had won, while Seo Yi-in and Jang Sam had lost. The protagonist looked at his friend and quietly thought that, while it counted as a win within the system, it felt more like a loss in reality. The match had already been decided the moment Jang Sam, unable to block the attack, exposed his true level. He admitted that his opponent was still just short of reaching a notable rank, at least for the time being. Soon after, Jang Sam regained consciousness and after seeing the result, quietly accepted his defeat. The protagonist confirmed it without saying more. Without looking at the protagonist, Jang Sam commented that even though the result was unfortunate, it had still been a good match. The protagonist replied that Go Hyun-woo would probably feel the same. Before leaving, Jang Sam adjusted his shoulder and asked the protagonist whether his techniques had been too obvious. The protagonist smiled and explained that they had been slightly noticeable, saying that his sword grip looked awkward and too normal, which made his moves easier to predict. Surprised, Jang Sam asked whether being too ordinary really made it that obvious. The protagonist answered by telling him to think about the nature of Dragon Slayer Academy, where the strongest people from all over the world gathered. In that kind of place, anything ordinary stood out more than normal. Jang Sam thought about that and agreed that being ordinary would indeed draw attention in such an environment. He then bowed respectfully to the protagonist, thanked him for the advice, and asked about another skill, Ghost Shadow Step. The protagonist reminded him that he should only ask about that after a win. Meanwhile, Go Hyun-woo was still unconscious on the ground, while Jang Sam, pulling himself together, promised that he would challenge the protagonist again next time. The protagonist accepted right away and said he would face him whenever he was ready. Later, the protagonist and Go Hyun-woo were transported back to the arena. Still embarrassed by how he had performed, Go Hyun-woo admitted his shame and asked the protagonist what he thought of the match. The protagonist reassured him, explaining that he had smartly created openings through probing attacks and had ended the fight cleanly with a solid finishing move. Go Hyun-woo looked at his broken sword with concern and said that he could not keep avoiding that problem forever. Sensing his worry, the protagonist jokingly said that the answer was simple. He just needed a better sword. Embarrassed, Go Hyun-woo thought to himself that his financial situation was nowhere near good enough to afford something like that. Without hesitation, the protagonist took a book from his inventory and handed it to Go Hyun-woo, explaining that weapons did not always have to be bought with money alone, then asked how many points he had saved. Go Hyun-woo quickly checked and said that he had around 5,000 points. The protagonist told him that this was more than enough and advised him to buy both an E-rank longsword and a D-rank longsword. Go Hyun-woo followed the advice and purchased them. A system notification confirmed the purchases, listing both swords and extra crafting materials called thermal catalyst reagents. which he also bought with his remaining points. The protagonist told him to hand over the reagents first, and when Go Hyun-woo asked what they were for, he explained that they were crafting materials and promised to help him make something useful. He told Go Hyun-woo to focus on recovering and assured him that they would work on it together. Grateful, Go Hyun-woo smiled softly and thanked the protagonist. That evening, the protagonist headed to the fourth workshop, thinking that the week's duels had already ended and that he should prepare materials for an item to help Go Hyun-woo. When he entered, he greeted the room and found a boy working on something. The boy glanced back for a moment, then quickly returned to his task, clearly showing no interest in the protagonist. The protagonist remembered that Bong Jae-suk had previously scolded this boy for interfering and assumed that he did not like being disturbed. Even so, the protagonist approached again, quietly apologizing to himself as he tried to copy a skill he had seen. His system recorded the action and confirmed that he had successfully copied another skill, filling his slots. Thinking ahead, the protagonist realized that with his new skill, he no longer needed the other one and decided it was time to let it go. He smiled as he looked over the abandoned equipment scattered around the room, thinking that it was a perfect place to gather decent materials. These items were failed works that had been thrown aside for some reason, but the crafted parts were still intact. He reasoned that taking apart such items was usually harder than getting new materials, but this time it might work in his favor. He started dismantling the equipment, and the boy eventually noticed and asked what he was doing. Without raising his head, the protagonist explained that he was trying to extract materials from it, sweating nervously. The boy asked if he could watch, and the protagonist agreed with a smile. He handed the boy a glass tube filled with materials, which immediately shocked him. The boy was amazed at how clean the materials looked, almost like new even after being taken apart. The protagonist, seeing a good chance, asked whether the boy would be interested in trading some materials. The boy's eyes lit up, and he quickly asked what the protagonist needed. The protagonist named a few important parts. The boy then hesitated, worried that Bong Jae-suk might scold him again for making that kind of deal. The protagonist assured him that trading a few materials would not be a problem and that, if needed, they could get permission directly. Relieved but still nervous, the boy offered to send a message and ask for approval. The message was seen but not answered, and he took the silence as permission. But before he could finish that thought, Bong Jae-suk suddenly appeared at the door, drenched in sweat. The boy was stunned and could not understand what was happening. Bong Jae-suk ignored the situation and walked straight to the protagonist. Without asking for any explanation, he asked whether the protagonist had dismantled the equipment himself. As he waited for an answer, he immediately brought out another set of items and explained that even though it was a failed project, it had used a large amount of materials. Pointing at the solid-looking equipment, Bong Jae-suk challenged the protagonist and asked whether he could dismantle it. The scene ended with the protagonist facing that challenge. The protagonist examined the equipment and noted that the work would take some time. Bong Jae-suk acknowledged that and assured him that he would be properly compensated for the effort. The protagonist smiled and said that since he also needed materials, he would rather receive goods as payment instead of money. Bong Jae-suk agreed and offered to prepare whatever the protagonist needed as soon as he sent a list. He then assured him that it was not urgent, told him to take his time, and asked him to send the requirements by message. The protagonist responded respectfully. Meanwhile, the boy who had been working nearby pointed to himself and asked for a favor. The protagonist asked what kind of favor it was, and the boy explained that there was something in another place that he needed dismantled. The protagonist did not mind and agreed to help. The boy thanked him and promised to help gather whatever materials the protagonist might need. The next morning, the protagonist entered the classroom, surprised by how quickly the morning had arrived. He thought about finishing his work after class since there was still plenty of time, and considered taking a short nap before the lesson started. When he noticed his friend already there early, he wondered why she had come so soon, remembering that she had disappeared without saying anything the day before. He calmly walked over and asked why she was there so early, whether she had skipped breakfast and whether she wanted something to eat. She did not answer and instead showed her annoyance. Watching her reaction, the protagonist realized that she was still holding on to her frustration. Trying to calm the mood, he explained that the match the day before had been one-sided and that his only intention had been to show her weaknesses. He explained that her fighting style became much weaker once her position was exposed, and since her magic bullets had already stabilized, he suggested that this time she consider learning a support skill. That caught her interest and she asked if he would train her himself. The protagonist gently set the bread on the table and explained that although he wanted to help, this was something she would gain more from learning under another specialist in that field. Even if it felt bothersome, he advised her to sign up for mentoring. After a short pause, she accepted and agreed to do it. Just then, Go Hyun-woo suddenly appeared and commented on her decision to sign up. The protagonist supported the decision and asked if Go Hyun-woo was feeling fine. Go Hyun-woo expressed his thanks, saying that thanks to the protagonist, he was in perfect physical condition. However, he admitted that even though his body was fine, he was still worried about the weapon he had bought the day before. He planned to test it in the upcoming duels. The protagonist smiled when he saw what Go Hyun-woo was holding and encouraged him to use that weapon too. Surprised by the item the protagonist handed him, Go Hyun-woo questioned it, unsure whether it was only a simple clip. The protagonist calmly explained that although it looked ordinary, it was actually a protective item that preserved weapon durability by restoring it automatically when needed. The item details then appeared on the screen, confirming that it was a sturdy clip that protected the weapon's condition and repaired it when necessary. The protagonist then attached the clip to Go Hyun-woo's clothes and suggested that he use it together with the new weapon he had gained from a previous duel. Reassured, Go Hyun-woo thanked him and promised to use the item well. Later, during the training matches, a white-haired girl appeared together with Go Hyun-woo's team. A notification displayed the match details, showing Go Hyun-woo's team facing Young Soo-ji, Park Na-ri and others, all with their stamina at full capacity. As both sides prepared to fight, Go Hyun-woo recognized Park Na-ri as a rising member of the Nature Club. He remembered the warnings from a senior about the spirit beast linked to her and stayed careful. The match began when the green-haired girl, while petting her creature, signaled it to prepare. The small cat on her shoulder jumped down and instantly transformed into a giant tiger covered in green energy. The beast charged fiercely toward Go Hyun-woo's team. Reacting quickly, Go Hyun-woo blocked the tiger's attack with his sword and signaled his teammate to strike. The white-haired girl joined the fight and hit the tiger with a powerful technique. But she was shocked to see that the attack barely hurt the beast, reducing only a small part of its health. Panic rose in her when she realized how tough the tiger was. The tiger struck back and sent the white-haired girl flying, while Go Hyun-woo called out to her in concern. The beast then turned on Go Hyun-woo, shattered his sword and knocked him back. As he struggled to steady himself before hitting the ground, he thought about how limited an E-rank weapon was against an enemy that strong. Refusing to give up, he drew another sword and, while watching the tiger, admitted that this fight would be hard to win. His teammate agreed and suggested trying a different method. Meanwhile, the tiger completely recovered its health, as the system notification showed its status returning to full. Go Hyun-woo quickly realized that the enemy team's strategy was to keep the spirit beast in front and let its health recover over and over. He also noticed that the two girls supporting the beast were leaving the caster unprotected and relying entirely on the beast's strength. After seeing the pattern, Go Hyun-woo pointed at his teammate and told her to aim straight for the tiger's core, knowing that this was their best chance to turn the fight around. Go Hyun-woo and Buk Kong immediately rushed toward the two girls standing across from them, ready to attack. The blue-haired girl, holding a crystal in her hand, had expected that kind of move and instantly activated a defensive skill. A wall of trees rose around her and her companion, blocking the incoming attacks. When the tree barrier suddenly appeared, both Go Hyun-woo and Buk Kong were briefly stunned. Without delay, Buk Kong activated her skill and released a strong ice charge strike, while Go Hyun-woo used his own skill to fire a concentrated stream of force. As he thought through the situation, Go Hyun-woo realized that their attacks would not break the barrier that easily. He decided that his next strike would have to go beyond the barrier's limit and end the fight in one blow. But before he could move, the tiger, which had been waiting behind him, appeared and attacked, quickly defeating Buk Kong. Startled by the tiger's sudden appearance, Go Hyun-woo froze for a moment. Later, the scene shifted back to the arena, where the scoreboard confirmed the result. Go Hyun-woo and Buk Kang's team had lost, while Park Na-ri's team had won. The next day, Go Hyun-woo expressed regret over the humiliating result from the day before. The protagonist told him that his effort had still been impressive considering how talented the opponent was. Go Hyun-woo then asked what the protagonist would have done in that situation. The protagonist explained that more than strategy or skill, the huge difference in equipment had decided the match. He added that Park Na-ri, backed by the Nature Club, had access to many kinds of skills and had recently gained a powerful artifact through trade, which meant she was equipped with superior gear from head to toe. Hearing that, Go Hyun-woo broke into a sweat and realized that defeat had been unavoidable. The enemy's strength had not come from skill alone, but also from complete preparation. The protagonist suggested that it might be time to think about other options. He explained that reaching Park Na-ri's level of equipment was impossible, but countermeasures were still possible. That gave Go Hyun-woo hope and he asked if there really was a way. The protagonist confidently brought up a rare debuff type item, the Demon Sword, and explained that it was essential for top-tier swordsmen. Hearing of it for the first time, Go Hyun-woo reacted with surprise and admitted that he had learned something new again from the protagonist. The protagonist then pointed at the clip attached to Go Hyun-woo's clothes and stressed that the first priority was making sure his weapon's durability held up. He advised him to focus on getting artifacts that improved weapon durability, especially for B-rank weapons and above. Go Hyun-woo doubted that such items would be easy to obtain. The protagonist, however, smiled and explained that even if it was still early, there was a way to get them, as drops from underground dungeons connected to the Dungeon Association. Go Hyun-woo immediately raised a concern, pointing out that it was dual season, which made that impossible. The protagonist calmly explained that it did not matter, because they would not be able to enter the underground dungeon next week either. When Go Hyun-woo asked why, the protagonist explained that underground dungeons involved real combat, unlike the surface. First years who had just enrolled would not be sent into life and death battles. Still uneasy, Go Hyun-woo asked if that meant there was no way at all. The protagonist reassured him that while it was not possible officially, there was another option. Go Hyun-woo questioned what he meant by officially, and the protagonist confidently suggested that they could sneak in by using the errand service to enter in secret. As soon as he heard that, Go Hyun-woo realized that the protagonist was talking about Shin Byung-chul and understood the plan at once. The protagonist confidently said that Shin Byung-chul would arrive soon. Not long after, Shin Byung-chul appeared before them, full of excitement and ready to help. The protagonist explained that he was planning to enter a dungeon and that Monday evening would be the right time. Shin Byung-chul immediately asked for the dungeon number. Without hesitation, the protagonist answered that it was number 388. Shin Byung-chul pulled out his notebook, confirmed that it was a D-rank dungeon called Feathered Serpent Altar meant for 4 people, and asked who would be going in. The protagonist pointed to Go Hyun-woo and showed that it would be only the 2 of them. Shin Byung-chul hesitated, worried that something could go wrong and that he might be blamed. The protagonist, however, assured him that in the worst case, they could simply leave the dungeon. Go Hyun-woo supported the plan and said that he was fully willing to go with the protagonist. Reluctantly, Shin Byung-chul agreed and began preparing for their entrance on Monday evening. The protagonist then asked what the payment for this request would be. Shin Byung-chul smiled and jokingly said that between them, payment was not needed, since he still owed the protagonist from a past event. He treated it as already settled and promised to help with full effort, though he admitted with a bit of humor that he had only gone underground once before. The protagonist, realizing that Shin Byung-chul was not very familiar with dungeon exploration, told him not to approach it half-heartedly. Shin Byung-chul, slightly embarrassed, promised that he would do his absolute best. Taking it further, the protagonist suggested adding one more dungeon to their plan for the sake of experience, dungeon number 104, a B-rank dungeon called Black Serpent Fang that reached deep levels. Shin Byung-chul immediately objected, saying that it was beyond what he could handle, but the protagonist encouraged him to at least ask the chief about it. After thinking it over, Shin Byung-chul agreed that it was not completely impossible and promised to ask. He then confirmed the plan and left after promising to meet them on Monday evening. After he left, the protagonist turned to Go Hyun-woo and said that they should finalize their plan. Go Hyun-woo quickly agreed and asked what they needed to do. The protagonist explained that they would first enter the scheduled D-rank dungeon, Feathered Serpent Altar, where Go Hyun-woo would get his weapon while the protagonist completed his own objective. He added that the following days would be used for preparation, including negotiating with the Thieves' Club for access to the deeper dungeon and securing the needed items. He warned that even the smallest mistake in that kind of dungeon could be deadly. Go Hyun-woo assured him that he was ready. The protagonist stressed that Go Hyun-woo's role was important not only in skill but also in teamwork, and that he needed to know the dungeon as well as the protagonist did. When Go Hyun-woo saw the guidebook spread out in front of him, he was shocked and nearly speechless. The protagonist smiled and explained that they were detailed guides for both of them, telling Go Hyun-woo to memorize every word without skipping anything. The scene then shifted to workshop number 1, where the protagonist was working on something when Bong Seok arrived. He asked about the materials the protagonist had been collecting, specifically floating stone extract, mana engine and weather chip, and whether they had been obtained. The protagonist gratefully explained that thanks to Bong Seok's help, he had been able to get those rare materials without difficulty and expressed his thanks. Bong Seok then looked at the gathered materials and noticed that the protagonist was finishing up. He asked if he could take a closer look, and the protagonist gave permission, asking him to wait a moment until he finished. The protagonist completed the work with visible excitement and announced that it was done. Bong Seok, looking at the staff, asked with curiosity what the protagonist had been making. He noted that from its shape, it looked like the head of a staff or scepter and asked whether the main body had already been secured. The protagonist smiled and explained that he still had not found anything suitable and planned to take his time choosing the right piece. Inwardly, he wondered if he should look in the lower levels of the dungeon district. Bang Siak then remarked that now that the rainy season was over, the protagonist probably would not be coming to the workshop as often. The protagonist agreed and expressed his thanks, saying that he would still stop by from time to time. The scene then shifted to Class 1-3's classroom, where the teacher explained the theme of the week's strategy mission, Sweep. A map called Rocky Zone appeared on the board along with rules stating that the dungeon was a two-person instance with random matchmaking. The teacher further explained that anyone could get a high score by clearing all the monsters. There was no time limit, so the students needed to watch out for hidden enemies. He stressed that both the terrain and teammates would be random, and that the students would be tested in a new environment with unfamiliar partners. After closing his book, the teacher told the students to cooperate and take their time, then dismissed the class. Afterward, Go Hyun-woo turned to the protagonist and remarked that it looked like they would not be able to team up for this week's mission. The protagonist answered with a light smile, agreeing that everyone would be entering alone. At that moment, Seo Yaen, who had been asleep, woke up and suggested pausing the mana bullet lessons for the week. She noted that mentoring week was coming soon and that new skills could be learned then. She suggested spending the time strengthening the basics instead. Go Hyun-woo agreed and said that sounded good, while Seo Yaen simply nodded. With a joking look, the protagonist told them to try practice mode before entering the real mission. Inwardly, he thought that practice mode was pointless for him and only a waste of time. As he looked ahead, the protagonist thought to himself that he would go straight into the actual mission without hesitation. His attention then moved to the system notification, and he silently hoped that he would be matched with a decent partner. No matter who it was, he intended to get a perfect score of 100%. He thought about what kind of teammate would be ideal and realized that someone with skills he could copy would suit him best. The system displayed the protagonist's current skill slots, showing that he already had 2 skills, Magitech and Silent Step. The protagonist realized that he would not be using Magitech anytime soon, so he considered replacing that slot with a more combat-focused skill. At that moment, he noticed that his partner had arrived right on time. Then, as he looked toward the portal, he grew confused and wondered what was going on. A red-haired girl stepped out of the portal, and when he recognized her, he was surprised but slightly amused, realizing that it was someone he had met before, Hong Hyun-woo. The red-haired girl was just as shocked, reacting strongly the moment she recognized the protagonist and feeling upset that she had run into him again. The protagonist wondered why she was reacting so strongly. At the same time, the red-haired girl recalled their earlier matches, from the placement exam to the PvP battles, where she had always beaten him badly. Because of that, she assumed it was only natural for him to feel intimidated. The protagonist smiled to himself and thought that his main goal was to clear the quest efficiently. He decided that keeping the atmosphere slightly tense would make things easier, so he chose not to ease the pressure. He then looked at her confidently, annoyed that she was not moving, and told her to get going without wasting more time. With tears in her eyes and clear nervousness on her face, the red-haired girl reluctantly agreed to follow him. Later, as they ran together, the red-haired girl began to regret her decision. She sat in silence and thought that she should have taken the day off and tried again the next day instead of forcing herself to clear the mission early just to protect her pride. After running for a while, she looked at the protagonist ahead of her and cried out inwardly in frustration. She had never wanted to be paired with him and could not understand how she had ended up stuck with him. She also wondered where they were even going, since the area around them looked strangely empty, without realizing that the protagonist was quietly killing every monster without drawing attention. She only looked at the system notification and wondered why everything felt too easy. She found it strange that monsters should have been around every corner, yet the area stayed empty. When she spotted a fallen goblin nearby, she panicked, thinking there was still one monster left, and called to the protagonist for help. The protagonist, however, ignored her, which only made her more frustrated. She clenched her teeth in irritation and wondered why he would not even answer when she called for help. It felt to her like she had been left alone to clean up everything. In her frustration, she activated her own skill, Combustion, and attacked a monster, while still thinking to herself how impressive the protagonist's fighting was, even though it annoyed her. Deep down, she wished they would stay together, and she grew irritated that he would not cooperate. Even if she did not say it, the thought remained in her mind. Meanwhile, the protagonist ran ahead of her and impatiently scolded her in his thoughts, wondering whether she really believed she could clear the entire mission alone. He urged her not to fall behind and to keep up with his pace. The red-haired girl, Hong Yunhua, hesitated for a moment, then agreed to follow his lead, answering awkwardly as if uncertain but still willing to cooperate. As she watched the protagonist, suspicion started to grow. She thought that something had felt off during the whole mission. He had not hesitated even once or stopped for a moment. He kept charging ahead without a second thought, as if he had already completed this exact mission hundreds of times before. Without warning, the protagonist suddenly stopped and told her to wait. He pointed toward a tunnel in the distance and asked if it was a burrow. Curious, he suggested that they take a closer look. After checking the entrance, Hong Yunhua judged that it was probably a goblin burrow because it was so small that a person could not crawl through it properly. Confident in his idea, the protagonist told her to check it anyway. Startled, she hesitated and asked if she really had to do it. The protagonist gave her a sharp look, implying that she could handle it and pushing her forward. Under pressure, she nervously agreed and decided to crawl into the hole despite her reluctance. Watching her go into the burrow, the protagonist grew confused. He had not expected her to actually crawl inside. He had only meant for her to cast a fire spell into it from outside. As she moved in, a yellow light suddenly burst out from the tunnel. The protagonist noticed it and wondered what the glow was. Before anyone could react, the tunnel exploded. Unshaken, the protagonist remarked that explosions like that were common in a dungeon like Ruby Tower. After the dust cleared, Hong Yunhua crawled out of the burrow and rubbed her face in frustration. She complained about what had happened and wondered why she was going through this, but then resigned herself to the fact that dungeon crawling often led to that kind of chaos. Getting back to her feet, she expressed relief that they had found the goblin burrow in time and managed to wipe out the goblins before they escaped. Just then, a system notification told them that only one monster remained. The protagonist noted it and said that they only had to defeat the final boss to clear the mission. But before they could respond, a dangerous monster suddenly appeared behind them. The protagonist quickly grabbed Hong Yunhua and warned her not to let her guard down in a dungeon. Feeling awkward, she apologized and blamed the explosion, thinking it might have drawn nearby monsters. The large boss monster now stood before them. The protagonist explained that it had to be the dungeon boss and reassured her that since they had to fight it anyway, this was a good chance. He told her to stay focused and promised that the fight would be manageable if they attacked together. As he looked at her, he thought that she still seemed shaken and partly blamed himself for it. He decided that he needed to help restore her confidence. With that in mind, he suddenly told her to face the boss alone. The girl was shocked by the sudden demand and could not understand how she was supposed to fight such a strong enemy by herself. The protagonist, however, confidently pushed her forward, insisting that she could do it and telling her not to back down. Encouraged by his words, she stepped forward and accepted the challenge, saying that she would try. Inside, the protagonist smiled to himself, wanting to see her true ability and silently urging her to prove herself. The girl then took her position to attack, gathering magical energy at the tip of her wand. Watching closely, the protagonist thought that this was her chance to show her real strength. She activated her skill, Overheat, and launched the attack. The monster was immediately angered by the sudden hit and charged at her. Seeing its reaction, Hong Yunhua panicked and thought about how fast it had countered. She wondered when it had moved that quickly. As the monster raised its weapon to strike, she desperately refused to lose. Driven by determination, she leaped into the air, activated her next skill, Flame Orb, and fired it straight at the monster. When the attack landed perfectly, she felt a surge of excitement and satisfaction, convinced that she had hit it cleanly. But to her shock, the monster barely reacted. It emerged from the explosion almost unharmed and prepared to attack again. Hong Yunhua's attack had barely damaged the dungeon boss. As she saw the result, tension and frustration appeared clearly on her face. She quickly realized that the boss had taken almost no damage and suspected that the dungeon had been designed with a damage reduction trait. That thought only made her more irritated at whoever had built the dungeon that way. Before she could rethink her next move, the dungeon boss threw its axe at her with tremendous force. She barely dodged it, knowing that the overheat effect would not last much longer. Almost at once, the boss followed by throwing its second axe. The unexpected combo left her almost no room to move. As she lowered her stance by instinct, she realized that it was already too late to dodge properly. With her options running out, she got ready to raise a barrier to protect herself. But before she could do anything, the protagonist stepped in and used magic to knock both axes away from her. The sudden rescue left her briefly stunned, but relieved that she had survived. The protagonist urged her to stop hesitating and use the power she still had left. She understood what he meant and remembered the fire pillar technique she had been avoiding. Memories connected to that skill briefly came back, memories she clearly wanted to forget. Even so, she knew that while the skill was powerful, its effective range was short. The protagonist made it clear that he would hold the boss in place so that she could focus completely on releasing its power. As he rushed forward, she tried to stop him out of worry, but he was already too fast. With one simple motion, he used magic to smash the dungeon boss into the ground and force it into a vulnerable position. Pushing down her hesitation, Hong Yunhua focused entirely on her part. The boss began struggling violently as it reacted to the magic circle forming beneath it. She noticed right away that the boss had sensed the spell, but the protagonist told her to keep going without losing focus. He kept pressuring the boss on purpose, making sure it stayed occupied and could not escape. Using his magic, the protagonist repeatedly drove the dungeon boss into the ground and stopped it from breaking free. Once the magic circle was finished, Hong Yun moved closer and warned him to get out of the area at once. Even when the boss rose again in anger and tried to attack, the protagonist calmly avoided the blow and moved just outside its range. After confirming that the distance was enough, Hong Yun steadied herself. She gathered all of her remaining strength, knowing that this one strike would decide everything. When she released the fire pillar, it completely swallowed the dungeon boss and left it no chance to recover. As the flames consumed the boss, the protagonist watched the result with quiet confidence. When the fire finally died down, the dungeon was fully cleared, and the system recorded a perfect clear with a full score and bonus rewards. Exhausted, Hong Yun admitted that the fight was finally over. The protagonist briefly reflected on how cleanly the battle had ended, even against the boss, though he knew that he had pushed himself harder than usual. After hesitating for a moment, Hong Yun approached him with a personal request. She asked him to make the replay of the battle private, clearly uneasy about letting others watch it publicly. To make up for the lost points, she offered a ruby and insisted that it was more than enough for that request. The protagonist was surprised by how valuable the ruby was and wondered to himself why she would go that far over a replay. From her side, his reaction made her worry that the offer might not be enough. Because of that, she tried to raise the offer, but he stopped her and agreed to settle for what she had already given. He acknowledged the effort she had shown in the battle and called her by name, which caught her by surprise. The fact that he had carried much of the fight from the start left her feeling conflicted and embarrassed. As she got ready to leave, she opened a portal and awkwardly returned the compliment before stepping out, quietly ending the encounter. Watching her go, the protagonist let out a small smile and thought that her embarrassment was unnecessary. Once she was gone, his face became serious as he began judging her performance. Hong Yunhua had moved much better than he had expected, and the rumors that she was on the level of rising talents now felt justified. What impressed him most was her close-range combat ability, which had gone beyond his first assumptions. Through the copied skill system, he confirmed that he had successfully obtained 2 abilities from her, Overheat, rank D, and Thief Step, rank B. That confirmed that her skill set had given him freedom in choosing what to copy. Although he was not completely sure what Overheat had taken from her, he could tell that it had given him access to a powerful flame-based technique called Inferno Fist. With a skill like that, he knew his physical abilities would rise greatly. His attention then moved to the ruby she had given him. He thought about what to do with it, knowing that he needed to go to the underground floor of the dungeon building that night. He decided that stopping by Ruby Tower later would be the most practical way to handle it. The scene then shifted to the ground floor of the dungeon building, where the protagonist was teleported inside. After a quick look around, he noticed that Go Hyun-woo and Shin Byung-chul had not arrived yet. Since he still had time, he chose to check his quest rewards while waiting. Opening his panel, he confirmed that the Week 4 Strategy Battle subquest had been fully completed. The objective had been cleared with a perfect completion rate, and the reward gave him an extra copy trait slot. Seeing that, he felt relieved because it finally let him copy a new trait. He hoped to find something useful before entering the underground dungeon. At that moment, someone appeared behind him and complained that he had gone ahead without saying anything. When the protagonist turned around, he saw 2 familiar faces. One of them urged the group to leave soon because it was already getting late, while Hyun-woo confidently said that he would not disappoint. Before they left, the brown-haired boy said that he had something to hand out. He gave both of them second-year tie pins and anonymous badges, telling them to put them on. After putting his own on, he explained that the items blurred their facial features and made their appearances look ordinary. With those on, even if they ran into senior students, they would not draw suspicion. The effect was immediate and obvious, and the protagonist was briefly surprised by how unclear the boy's face had become. Hyun-woo pointed out that simply passing by others would keep anyone from recognizing them. Inside, the brown-haired boy found the feeling strange but amusing. Satisfied, the protagonist signaled for them to continue downward together. As they went down the stairs, Hyun-woo commented on how long the path felt. The brown-haired boy reassured him that they were almost there. Hyun-woo then admitted that although he knew the dungeon building was big, he had not expected it to be this huge. That was especially true considering how long it took just to reach the D-rank floors. He started imagining how deep the lower levels must be. Before he could think further, the protagonist explained that teleportation devices were normally used for movement. But because they had entered secretly, those options were not available. He added lightly that a skill guide could still get around those systems if needed. The brown-haired boy agreed and laughed as they got close to their destination. When they arrived, the brown-haired boy formally guided them forward and announced the location. They had reached dungeon number 388, the Feathered Serpent Altar.